who has given us guidance, happiness, health, and mercy, so we can attend and participate in this special event. And also, on behalf of Indonesian Naval Command and Staff College, I would like to welcome all the experts, speakers, and audience. In this special morning, we have several agendas as follows. First, opening. Second, the singing of national anthem of Indonesia. Praying, and then speech from keynote speaker, continue by first session presentation and discussion, and there will be lunch break, and then continue with second session presentation and discussion, and then token of appreciation, the singing of Bagimu Negeri song, and then the last is closing. Well, ladies and gentlemen, move on to the next agenda is the singing of national anthem of Indonesia. Please all rise. National Anthem of Indonesia. Please be seated. Before starting the seminar, let us pray for the smooth running of this event.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Prayer will be recited according to Muslim. Please, the order listen adjust. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alamin. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in. God, the Almighty, our sincere gratitude for your blessing so that we could attend this International Maritime Seminar in 2020, which ran very well. God, the most merciful, to you only we worship and seek help, so thus please us with your guidance and support, so that this International Maritime Seminar would result in sound allies and great people, which is beneficial for development and the glory of Indonesia, as well as for our upcoming achievement to glorify and advance of our Indonesia country. God, the most gracious, take our efforts and devotion to be good deeds on your side and make this meeting full of your grace and pleasure. God, make our separation as pleased and forgiven one. God, the most merciful, forgive our oversight, negligence, and save our good deeds. Rabbana, atina fid dunya hasanah, wa fil akhirati hasanah wa qina adzaban nar. Walhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
And now, let us step into the next agenda, which is keynote speech by the Honorable Chief of the Indonesian Navy, Admiral Yudo Margono, SAMM. For Admiral, time is yours.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera bagi kita semua. Pertama-tama, perkenankan saya untuk menyambut yang terhormat para tokoh sebagai pembicara pada SESKOAL International Maritime Seminar 2020. Yang terhormat Dr. Insinyur Dwi Suryo Indroyono Susilo, MSc, Menteri Koordinator Bidang Kemaritiman tahun 2014-2015. Yang saya hormati Laksamana Purnawirawan Profesor Dr. Marstio, yang saya hormati Laksamana Madya Purnawirawan Dr. Desi Alpetma Mahid MSc, yang saya hormati Laksamana Madya Purnawirawan Pradep Chauhan FISM, BSM, Direktur Jenderal of the National Maritime Foundation India, Dr. Grace Rahman, peneliti utama Australian National Center for Ocean Resources and Security, University of Wollongong, Australia, Dr. Sasi Jayakumar dari S. Rajaratnam School of International Studies, Singapura, Mr. Ipeita Nishida, peneliti senior International Peace and Security Department, The Sasakawa Peace Foundation, Jepang. Yang saya hormati Bapak Edi Prastiono, PhD, dosen tetap pada Departemen Hubungan Internasional Fakultas Ilmu Sosial dan Politik Universitas Indonesia dan pengamat ahli bidang pertahanan dan keamanan. Laksamana Muda TNI Angkasa Dipua SEMM, Asisten Intelijen Kasal, dan Saudara Gilang Kembara MA, peneliti Bara Center for Strategic International Studies. Dan yang saya hormati Komandan Sekolah Staf dan Komando TNI Angkatan Laut, Laksamana Muda TNI Dr. Iwan Isnurwanto, SH MAP MTRhan. Seluruh perwira staf, dosen pengajar, perwira siswa SESKOAL Angkatan 58, serta seluruh peserta seminar, baik yang hadir langsung di auditorium SESKOAL maupun yang hadir secara daring. Selaku Kepala Staf Angkatan Laut, saya menyampaikan ungkapan terima kasih serta penghargaan kepada seluruh pihak yang telah berkontribusi terhadap kesuksesan penyelenggaraan seminar internasional yang diadakan oleh Sekolah Staf dan Komando Angkatan Laut ini. Hasil seminar yang dapat bermanfaat bagi kemajuan kerjasama maritim, khususnya di kawasan Asia Tenggara ini, didasarkan kepada kepentingan semua pihak, terutama mereka yang dekat dengan dunia kemaritiman. Kesan pertama saya terhadap seminar ini adalah gema yang mampu dijangkau oleh seminar melalui kemajuan teknologi yang mampu memperkuat pesan yang ingin disampaikan kepada komunitas maritim yang paling jauh sekalipun dalam batas jaringan. Mungkin ini adalah hikmah yang dapat kita ambil dari adanya wabah pandemi COVID-19 yang membuat kita berkumpul dengan cara memanfaatkan teknologi yang belum pernah kita bayangkan sebelumnya. Topik yang didiskusikan pada seminar ini yaitu kerjasama maritim sebagai masa depan kawasan. Hal ini sangat penting karena berhubungan langsung dengan tugas dan peran universal Angkatan Laut, yakni keamanan laut dan diplomasi Angkatan Laut. Keinginan bersama untuk memajukan kerjasama maritim dengan tujuan mempertahankan dan menjamin stabilitas dan juga keamanan kawasan guna mendorong negara-negara di kawasan untuk meningkatkan pola kerjasama lebih lanjut. Topik ini sendiri juga didasarkan kepada munculnya berbagai tantangan pada aspek maritim, ditambah kehadiran pandemik COVID-19 yang berdampak pada seluruh bangsa tanpa terkecuali. Tantangan bidang maritim masa depan ini sangatlah besar, sehingga tidak ada satupun bangsa yang mampu mengatasinya, apalagi menyelesaikannya sendiri. Dalam perspektif saya, kerjasama merupakan elemen kunci yang paling memungkinkan dalam meningkatkan dan mengembangkan kapasitas dan kapabilitas dari tiap bangsa dalam menghadapi permasalahan yang muncul dengan jalan saling melengkapi. Dengan dasar hal tersebut, upaya untuk memajukan pemahaman yang komprehensif dan juga implementasi kerjasama maritim yang lebih kuat dan lebih luas harus menjadi prioritas dan terbangun dalam visi dari Angkatan Laut masa depan dan juga pemangku kepentingan lainnya. Kita harus mulai menyadari bahwa domain maritim bukan tempat untuk prinsip yang menang mengambil semuanya dan yang kalah kehilangan segalanya. Kita harus mampu berbagi dengan tujuan untuk bergerak maju bersama. Dengan seminar internasional yang dikemas dalam kerangka akademis ini, kita sangat memerlukan pemikiran kritis dan pemahaman yang mendalam. Dengan demikian, diharapkan akan muncul ide segar, serta memicu pendapat yang dapat diambil, serta kemudian dirubah menjadi tindakan di dunia nyata untuk keuntungan Angkatan Laut dan juga negara. Lebih jauh lagi, seminar ini diharapkan dapat memberikan gambaran yang jelas bagi peserta dan juga segenap komunitas maritim terhadap pentingnya kerjasama dan kolaborasi yang dapat menguntungkan kita bersama. Tentunya hal terpenting adalah dapat memperluas pengetahuan yang kita miliki untuk bergerak lebih jauh lagi dalam komunitas Angkatan Laut dan lingkungan maritim nasional. Para hadirin peserta seminar yang saya hormati, khususnya para siswa SESKOAL Angkatan 58. Meskipun pelaksanaan seminar ini dilaksanakan secara hibrid, melalui kombinasi antara konferensi daring dan luring dengan memanfaatkan teknologi video conference yang disebabkan oleh pandemi COVID-19. Namun, hal tersebut tidak menghentikan kita untuk mencari dan mengetahui pengetahuan baru seperti halnya yang kita laksanakan hari ini dengan penuh semangat dan rasa keingintahuan yang besar. Atas alasan tersebut, saya mendorong agenda yang dibawa oleh seminar ini yang bertujuan untuk membangun kesepahaman di mana kerjasama dan juga kolaborasi dapat menjadi fondasi mendasar dari interaksi kawasan dan juga global. Untuk penyelenggara seminar yang sukses ini, sekali lagi secara mendalam saya menyampaikan selamat kepada Komandan SESKOAL serta seluruh panitia atas kerja keras dan persistensinya dalam mewujudkan seminar bertaraf internasional ini menjadi kenyataan. Begitu juga saya sampaikan kepada para pembicara dan penanggap ahli yang telah secara aktif berkontribusi demi jalannya seminar ini. Saya mengharapkan agar diskusi yang dilaksanakan dalam seminar ini dapat membuahkan hasil yang menjadi pengetahuan yang mampu merubah ke arah yang lebih baik bagi seluruh peserta, khususnya para perwira siswa SESKOAL Angkatan 58, yang kemudian akan membawa ide segar pada dunia praktikal ketika mereka telah lulus dari sekolah ini. Demikian sambutan saya, sekali lagi saya ucapkan terima kasih pada seluruh peserta seminar. Demikian, wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera bagi kita semuanya. Jala Sweva, Jaya Mahe.
Thank you, the Honorable Chief of Indonesian Navy. Admiral Yudo Margono, SAMM, for the speech. Dear guests and participants, before we start this event, first, let us watch and listen. Pillar of Maritime Security in the Region as prologue.
In the 21st century, maritime space is one of the most important domains as it influences the geopolitics, geoeconomic, and geostrategic developments. The importance of open and free seas and oceans cannot be underestimated as countries around the world depend on maritime traffic flow for shipping of goods, people, and energy. As we grow towards globalization, with depleting sources of energy and food, along with the role of non-state actors in the international arena, the seas and oceans are becoming increasingly important for the survival of many countries. According to the United States Asia-Pacific Maritime Security Strategy, more than half of the busiest ports in the world are located in the region. The South China Sea sees around 30% of global trade passing through the disputed waters among 4 Asian countries as well as China. The Malacca Strait, also located in our region, is one of the busiest straits in the world where 15 million barrels of oil were brought to consumer countries in the region through these straits in the 2014 alone. In the early years of the 21st century, the global center of economy and the politics have shifted from Europe to Asia Pacific. Asia Pacific remains the driver of the global economy that requires a stable and peaceful region, including the maritime domain. Furthermore, our region has also seen several challenges and threats to maritime security, including traditional to non-traditional security threats. Maritime security refers to threats that occur in the maritime domain, such as sea accidents, marine climate change, marine pollution, terrorist acts, weapon proliferation, international disputes, human trafficking, illegal fishing, piracy, and smuggling. Moreover, challenges such as those posed by natural disasters in the form of tsunamis and typhoons, for example, are also of concern. The world is also grappling with the impacts of unprecedented COVID-19 pandemic. The virus has infected more than 27 million people worldwide. Beyond the casualties of this pandemic, countries are also faced severe economic effects hampered by the implementation of lockdowns or large-scale social restriction policies. In overcoming this pandemic, other issues arise and go beyond health and economic issues, including matters of cooperation among stakeholders who were unable to reach consensus on issues. Other social issues have also appeared, including the trust in governments, best ways of managing the pandemics, and even the ongoing state of the pandemic itself. Regarding the maritime domain, technology is fundamental. This transformation brings about both positive and negative implications. While technology can improve our quality of life, it has also enhanced and expanded criminal networks and activities. In order to leverage modern technology, those operating in the maritime domain must also become aware and develop strategies to handle the inevitable security issues that modern systems and technology bring with them. Cooperation among countries in the regions is a must, as the capability and capacity of its state varies and one would complement each other, hence pushing forward regional defense diplomacy concept and the recalibration of Indo-Pacific regional security architecture is an urgency we need to realize for us to navigate challenges and threats in the region effectively and efficiently. With the theme, Maritime Cooperation is our regional future, it is expected that the international seminar in 2020 could provide some positive, important, and useful contributions on the conceptual cooperation framework among user states to maintain regional maritime security stability in support of global economy. The seminar priorities are directed to the 3 pressing threats, namely transnational organized crime, national disaster and global pandemic, as well as cyber, media and information warfare, and its implications to maritime security.
Dear guests and participants, before we move into the next agenda, which is the first session of the presentation from the experts and speakers, let me introduce you to the first session moderator. But first, let us watch and listen fillers of hers.
Captain Sylvia Purnama Rika. Captain Sylvia, who was born in Krui on March 18, 1973, is a graduate of Sekolah Perwira Prajurit Kari in 1998. The first impression that can be seen is a woman who has a list of talent in various fields aside from medical field, because this dentist who specializes in pediatric dental health is really familiar with a word of health. The expertise in words processing often brings this graduate of SESKOAL in 2013 to get involved in many events, both in local and international, as follows: Section Defense of Force Dental Services 2017 in Madrid, Spain. This middle rank officer who mastered in saxophone is a head of material for dental and oral health department in R.E. Marta Dinata Dentistry Institute, or Ladogi R.E. Marta Dinata. She has series of jobs in the naval health environment, such as in Lantamal, Tua, SESKOAL, Mabesal, Koarmaba, Kobang Dikal, and Mabes TNI. She noted as a commander of Navy Medical School Jakarta in 2017. To our distinguished participant of international seminar, please welcome Captain Dr. Gigi Sylvia Purnamarika, SP KGA, FECD.
Ladies and gentlemen, I present you the moderator of the first session, Captain Sylvia Purnamarika.
Thank you very much to the Master of Ceremony, Honorable Commandant Staff College, Rear Admiral Dr. Iwan Isnurwanto, distinguished speakers and expert participants, ladies and gentlemen. A very good morning to you all, wherever you are, and thank you for joining us for today's seminar. I'm Captain Sylvia, and in the next 2 hours and 45 minutes, I'm in charge to moderate this first session. Bringing up the theme, future challenges and opportunities for maritime security, 3 distinguished speakers and 2 experts will deliver their relevant topics. And before paying attention to each presentation, we will have a short introduction of speakers and expert biographies through video fillers on the screen.
Rear Admiral Angkasa Dipua, SEMM. He was graduated from Indonesian Naval Academy in 1988. Is a figure who feels familiar with intelligence from 2019 until present. He has served as an Assistant Intelligence of Indonesia Chief of Navy, or Asintel, Kasal. Rear Admiral, who also ever served as the Chief of Navy Security Service in 2017, has series of roles that in line with his area as follows: Assistant Intelligence Commander of the Indonesian Navy Main Base Tanjung Pinang in 2008, Defense Attaché of Republic of Indonesia in Hanoi, Vietnam in 2009, Indonesian Armed Forces Strategic Intelligence Agency in 2011, served in Navy Security Services in 2012 until 2013, NDC Thailand in 2014, Assistant Intelligence to the Commander-in-Chief, Eastern Naval Command in 2016, Oban 1, Ren Sintel Panglima TNI in 2017, Chief of Navy Security Service in 2017, and Assistant Intelligence of Indonesia Chief of Navy in 2020. The career of this officer, who is fluent in French, is also supported by many education he has taken, both in Indonesia and abroad, as follows: Indonesian Navy Staff and Command School, PAMGAL course, certain Marine Crime Investigator Officer course, English Communication course, Counterterrorism Intelligence course, Defense Intelligence Research, Intelligence Strategic Officer course, Defense Atasel Force Republic of Indonesia, French Language course, Inspirational, Trustworthy Leader Brevet Royal Thailand Army Signature, Scout Training in Ceylon, Officer Corps of Thai, and 57th NDC course Lemhanas in Thailand. To our distinguished audience, please welcome Rear Admiral Angkasa Dipua, SEMM. Dr. Chris Rahman. Chris Rahman is Principal Research Fellow in Maritime Strategy and Security and Associate Professor at Anchors, University of Wollongong. He holds a BA degree from Victoria University of Wellington, an MA from the University of Waikato, and a PhD from the University of Wollongong. Dr. Chris is academic strategist with a research focus on strategic theory, maritime strategy, Australian defense policy, China, and the strategic relation of the Indo-Pacific region. In addition, he worked on contemporary issues in maritime security. He regularly conducts research, advisory, capacity building, and cooperation activity for the Royal Australian Navy, Department of Defense, Australia Border Force and Maritime Borders Command Department of Home Affairs, and Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. He currently leads a major Royal Australian Navy history project on the Pacific Patrol Boat Program. Ladies and gentlemen, please give applause for Dr. Chris Rahman from University of Wollongong, Australia. Dr. Sasi Jayakumar. Dr. Sasi Jayakumar assumed the appointment as head Center of Excellence for National Security on 1 April 2015 and the appointment of Executive Coordinator, Future Issues and Technology on August 2017. Dr. Sasi Jayakumar was educated at Oxford University, where he studied history. He has published in various peer-reviewed journals and edited volumes on topics relating to medieval history. He was a member of the Singapore Administration Service from 2002 until 2017. During this time, he was posted to various ministries, including the Ministry of Defense, Manpower, Information, and the Arts and Community Development, Youth and Sport, and he was from August 2011 until July 2014, a senior visiting research fellow at the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy. His research interests include extremist, social research, cyber, and homeland defense. He is currently completing a major book project relating to local politics of forthcoming National University of Singapore Press 2020. Ladies and gentlemen, please give applause for Dr. Sasi Jayakumar, Senior Fellow, Head of Center of Excellence for National Security, Executive Coordinator of Future Issues and Technology. Admiral Retired Professor Dr. Marsetio, with a myriad of experience in the maritime world, make him trust on various occasions as follows. The Special Envoy of Indonesia in IMO, London. The Special Consultant of Coordinating Minister for Maritime and Investment in the Maritime Defense Field. Ministry of Tahun Expert Staff, the Chairman of the Assembly for Bureau Classification Indonesia. Served as the Navy Chief of Staff from December 2012 until December 2014. Visiting Professor in Naval Postgraduate School, Monterey, United States of America. Regular speaker and lecturer in a national defense institution. Lecturer in SESKOAL, SESKOAL Angkatan, and Indonesian Defense University. He also often asks to share his knowledge in various seminar forums, either in Indonesia or abroad. These figures that really like sport has top 4 achievement in all his military education as follows. The best graduated from Indonesian Naval Academy on 1981 with the achievement of Adi Makayasa. The best graduated from regular education of SESKOAL in 1996 with the achievement of Dharma Wiratama. A graduated from regular course of SESKOAL in 2001 with the best achievement. A graduated regular course of National Defense Institution with the achievement of Wibawa Sroja Nugraha. He also studied at several international education institutions, Operation School in Netherlands, ISC, Royal Naval College in United Kingdom, Naval Operation Course in Italy, Senior Executive Course in Hawaii, and Harvard Kennedy School in Boston, USA. His focus on maritime issues, Navy, and leadership is poured in a form books that he writes. Some of those books are Seapower Indonesia, TNI Angkatan Laut Berkelas Dunia, Kesadaran Baru Maritime, and Kepemimpinan Nusantara. And those books have become reference for the future leader from military and civilian. Ladies and gentlemen, to our distinguished audience, please welcome Admiral Retired Professor Dr. Marsetio. Dr. Insinyur Dwi Suryo Indroyono Susilo Master of Science talked about maritime for this former of Coordinating Minister for Maritime and Investment Affairs in the Cabinet Kerja 2014 until 2019 is something that he usually used to do because before he served as a minister. This figure, who was born in Bandung, West Java on March 27, 1955, was served as the head of Research Agency for Marine and Fisheries. He was graduated of University of Iowa, USA, majoring in geology, remote sensing in 1987. In 1997, he was a regular committee of National Maritime Council in Department of Marine and Fisheries. Afterward, in 1997 until 1998, he was a Deputy of Chief of Agency for the Assessment and Application of Technology. And in 2001 until 2008, he was served as a head of the Marine and Fisheries Research Agency. Thereafter, he was a secretary to the Coordinating Minister for People Welfare from 2008 until 2011. And 2012, he was served as the director of the FAO Fisheries and the Aquaculture Policy and the Resource Division. Ladies and gentlemen, to our distinguished participant of international seminar, please welcome Dr. Insinyur Dwi Suryo Indroyono Susilo, Master of Science.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, please give applause to our experts and also speakers today. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, to the stations, each speaker will have 25 minutes to deliver the presentations consecutively. And after all presentations delivered, participants will then have 1 hour for discussion. Participants, ladies and gentlemen, now it is time for the first speaker to share his topic, cracking down transnational organized crime in the region. Without further ado, I cordially invite Rear Admiral Angkasa Dipua to deliver his presentation.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. The Honorable Chief of Staff of the Indonesian Navy, as the keynote speaker, distinguished experts and speakers, and also all the members of this seminar. Thank you for your attention, for giving me a chance and time. Today, I would like to deliver the importance of prosecuting transnational organized crime in this region, especially Southeast Asia, with the title Cracking Down Transnational Organized Crime in the Region. As the scope of my presentation in this morning, the first of all is about of the references of transnational organized crime. The second is the classification of TOC crimes. Third is prosecution of trafficking by the Indonesian Navy. Then current challenges. And the last is future opportunities and outlooks related to handling TOC crimes. International law, which is the reference of prosecution on transnational organized crime, originated from the UN Convention Against Transnational Organized Crime, which was carried out in the New York on 15 November 2000, which then had legal force at the UN on 29 September 2003, with the presence of 189 parties and countries and 147 who signed, including Indonesia. In 2009, Indonesia ratified the Convention through Law number 5 of 2009 concerning ratification of the United Nations Convention Against Transnational Organized Crime. At the UN Top Convention, it was decided not to define by default on the definition of transnational crime. However, it was agreed that 4 types of TOC crimes could be charged under the TOC UN and regulation, referring to UNTOC, DERA, participation in TOC organization, money laundering, corruption, and attempts to obstruct the legal process against TOC. There are several national laws in the form of constitution that applied before Indonesia ratified UNTOC through Law number 5 of 2009 concerning the ratification of UNTOC. Those are related to people smuggling, corruption crimes, narcotics crimes, and fisheries crime. 3 main TOC crimes are corruption, trafficking, and money laundering. On this occasion, I will focus on the discussion of trafficking, which is indicated to be carried out by an organized and cross-country syndicate, especially in areas such as illicit drugs or drug smuggling, human trafficking, and migrant smuggling. As you all know, Indonesia is an archipelagic country that laid down between 2 oceans and 2 continents. Indonesia is located in a strategic location straight along major sea lanes connecting East Asia, South Asia, and Oceania. Therefore, Indonesia has strategic geographical position in it poses TOC as a national threat. As shown on the slide, 2/3 of Indonesia's territory are waters area. It could be a challenge, especially for Indonesia Navy, in terms of combating the transnational organized crime. In accordance with Article 9, letter B, the Navy is tasked with enforcing the law and maintaining security in the marine area of national jurisdiction based on the provision of national and international law that have been ratified. In connection with the TOC crime, the Indonesian Navy has the authority to arrest and then submit it to the competent agency for further legal proceeding. In the realm of TOC enforcement, by the scope of regional maritime security, the Indonesian Navy has an active role in handling trafficking crimes, including drug smuggling, illegal immigrant workers, and illegal immigration syndicates. Cases of illegal migrant workers and illegal immigrants are classified to transnational crimes because of these actions are indicated to human trafficking activities by a cross-country syndicate. On the slide, we can see a visualization of world drug trafficking routes from various continents, where the crime mode is dominated through sea routes, which is estimated not less than 80% of drug smuggling. This demands serious attention from world-related agencies and the importance of regional cooperation between regional countries. Because drugs can be a factual threat in the form of economic, also health and psychological damage in Indonesia's young generation. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, the following slide is an overview based on data from National Narcotics Board of Republic of Indonesia, consists of crystal methamphetamine, ecstasy, and marijuana distribution routes by non-state actor TOC in the region. As shown on the map, the TOC is dispersed to many places around the neighboring country to cover up their illegal activity. It's almost impossible for one nation to tackle the TOC by itself, since the linkage of TOC spread like a spider web. And then, as I presented on a previous slide, the geographic position of Indonesia is ideal for the TOC activity. They have a huge chance to do illegal activity via our waters. Hence, you could see on the slide almost all the routes are carried out to the sea. Several modes of drug smuggling by sea are carried out using various types of ships which are camouflaged in such a way that it's difficult for officers to find them. The types of vessels used include yacht, fishing boats, cargo ship, fast fishing boat or called high-speed craft, and small submarines. From the facts of the drug smuggling arrest by the Indonesian Navy in the 2018 to 2019 period, around 80% of drug smuggling activities were carried out by sea. In this case, the Indonesian Navy had thwarted the smuggling of drugs weighing 1.037 tons of crystal meth carried by MV Sunrise Glory in Riau Island, due from Penang, Malaysia. Statistically, in 2018, showed that approximately 25% were captured by the Indonesian Navy from total number of drug cases thwarted in Indonesia. From January to September 2020, the Indonesian Navy also succeeded to making 10 arrests. Then the legal process was submitted to the authorized agency. In the period of 2018 to 2020, the Indonesian Navy has significantly 20 times succeeded in abolishing the smuggling drugs types of methamphetamine, ecstasy, and marijuana. In this case, the Indonesian Navy has contributed to the state in saving the circulation of illicit money approximately 0.178 billion US dollars due to drug smuggling. Furthermore, saving Indonesia's young generation from the bad effects of drugs and protecting the health of the Indonesian people. The high interest of Indonesian citizens to work in Malaysia with the hope of earning a high enough wage of compared to Indonesia is a factor in increasing number of illegal Indonesian migrant workers to Malaysia. The economic capacity of prospective Indonesian migrant workers is relatively limited. Make them choose unofficial routes. This is supported by the promise of travel agents who can guarantee the escape to Malaysia illegally. The activities of sending migrant workers to Malaysia carried out by syndicates, which indicated to human exploitation that are categorized as human trafficking, such as exploitation as commercial sex workers and others. The kinship relation between indigenous Papuans and PNG, who consider that they are still of one race, is a factor in the frequent occurrence of traditional cross-border activities on the Indonesia-PNG border, which so far have only been provided with a cross-border card and a crossing permit card for border crossers. Border crossing activities are mostly motivated by economic aspect. The need is other between the Maroccan people and PNG, where the people of PNG always trade their agricultural and marine products by boat. Otherwise, the Maroccan people cross border to PNG for business. However, Indonesia-PNG border crossing activities have been considered to be commonplace. There are indications of abuse, vulnerability by certain groups or syndicates to smuggle drugs and weapons. Recently, Rohingya refugees from Myanmar entering Indonesia have become the main trend since 2009 and reached a fluctuation number totaling 1,522 people in 2015. As of September 2020, 395 people enter Indonesia. Since Indonesia policy doesn't ratify the 1951 UN Convention and 1967 Protocol on refugees is not obliged to accept refugees. Currently, the issue of asylum seekers or refugees remains a national problem because there are no specific regulation about asylum seekers or refugees in Indonesia. So far, the handling carried out by the Indonesian government has prioritized a humanitarian approach. However, it is necessary to be aware of the potential for TLC crimes committed by certain syndicates. From the facts of events, there are several regions in Indonesia as the entry and exit point of immigrants, as depicted on the slide where there is a green dot that indicates the influx area of immigrants, while a red color indicates not official exit areas of immigrants. This is a graph of handling cases of illegal immigrants that have been carried out by the Navy since 2019 to September 2020 compared to 2019 cases of illegal migrant workers in 2020 tend to have increased to number of events, whereas the incidence of illegal immigrants has decreased. After seeing the above explanation, in fighting transnational crime, Indonesia cannot stand alone because these crimes are a form of transnational crime. So it is important for the Indonesia to have cooperation with other countries, especially in the regional area. In addition, the limitation of the authority of the Navy in handling trafficking needed a maritime cooperation among government agencies in Indonesia. Indonesia, in this case, the Indonesian Navy through the ASEAN Forum has conducted several collaborations such as the ASEAN Navy Chief Meeting, the ASEAN Maritime Naval Exercise, and the Malacca Strait Sea Patrol, while in terms of bilateral relations with East ASEAN country, Navy-to-Navy talks has done talks strategic. The following are several forms of cooperation between the Indonesian Navy and state navies in the region, both strategically and nature of operation and exercises. Observing of cooperation that has been programmed almost no activities that focus on the handling of TOC. But the proficiency level of the cooperation program, there are several partnership opportunities that can be optimized towards the handling of the TOC among other MSSP, MSP, IEC, so that future expected handling TOC crime more focused and directed. Distinguished guests, not only with ASEAN countries, Indonesia also has a cooperation program with other countries, particularly cooperation between the Navy. It can be an opportunity to further enhance the role of the Navy, in particular in combating TOC that occurred during this. In response to challenges and opportunities in combating TOC, then we suggest some programs or activities that could strengthen international coordination among others. Intelligence exchange to exchange strategic data needed to eradicate TOC. Information sharing to provide an opportunity for anyone, anywhere to share information about the development of current TOC activities. Coordinate patrol to raise awareness and reduce the potential TOC activity that is in the border between countries. International Maritime Security Symposium to discuss maritime security issues and find solutions, in particular TOC solution. Respected seminar participants, before we close the presentation, we convey some hopes as a reflection for all of us. That TOC is a real threat to non-state actors that occurs in the world and requires the cooperation of all stakeholders, both national and international. In recent 3 years, Indonesian Navy has thwarted a potential illegal underground economy worth 2,621 trillion rupiah, or equivalent as 0.178 billion US dollar accumulatively. Furthermore, Indonesia Navy also saved life of young generation from illicit drug as a good implication. With that, I conclude my presentation. I hope this presentation could be useful and can be discussed with the next session. I wish I could join the interactive discussion with all of you, but due to other activities that I must attend, I will be represented by Wasintel Kasa, First Admiral Denny Handrata. Thank you for your attention, and wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you for your interesting brutal presentations, Admiral, about regional transnational organized crime and best practice to combat these illegal activities. Well, ladies and gentlemen, before we get started to the next presenter, for those who are joining us online, You can type your questions into the chat box during the presentation by mentioning your name, rank, and institutions. Well, all seminar attendees, now I will give the time to the second speaker, Dr. Chris Rahman, who will deliver a presentation entitled Disaster Risk Management and COVID-19 Responses. Please welcome Dr. Chris Rahman.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we do.
Can you hear me and see the PowerPoint?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. Chief of Staff in Indonesian Navy, and to all my friends at SESKOAL, good morning, and thank you for the invitation to this international seminar. My topic this morning is Navy's disaster response and the COVID-19 pandemic. And I'd like to start the presentation by just elaborating a little bit on the types of disasters that we may encounter. Some of these are obvious, and particularly in our current period of pandemic crisis, but others may not be thought about so frequently. And I've distinguished here between natural and man-made disasters. So in the category of natural disasters, we have earthquakes, tsunamis, such as the Indian Ocean tsunami of Boxing Day 2004, which you can see on the top of the slide, floods, fires, large-scale storms. One that I think needs to be thought about more frequently because the consequences are so significant. In fact, probably the greatest consequence of any of these natural risks are collisions with near-Earth objects such as comets, asteroids, or meteorites. And on the bottom of the screen, I've shown you the 2013 Chelyabinsk meteor that grazed the atmosphere above Siberia. Another extraterrestrial natural threat is that of solar flares, and a large solar storm certainly has the possibility of damaging and destroying a large part of the electrical infrastructure on Earth. Volcanic eruptions are another one that Indonesia in particular is very familiar with. Major landslides, both on land and at sea, and landslides at sea have the potential to create tsunamis as well. And lastly, of course, pandemics. In our second category, we have man-made disasters. The most significant of these, of course, is war itself, but we can also think about lesser types of conflict, such as civil conflict and unrest, terrorist attacks, the potential consequences of large-scale cyber attacks, especially for important infrastructure. So all that vital infrastructure, such as electricity grids and water reticulation systems and so forth. Airliner crashes, maritime casualties, and for example, this one on the top of the screen is the chemical tanker Bow Mariner, which sank off Virginia after an explosion about 17 years ago. I've also included fires under this category because the types of fires that we experience, and for example in Australia, most notably this last summer, and also currently in the United States, in California and Colorado and elsewhere, whilst these can be caused by natural means such as lightning strikes, it's more common that they are caused by people, either accidentally or via arson. The next potential risk is that of major industrial accidents. And we see here the explosion in August in the port of Beirut, where a large quantity of ammonium nitrate, poorly stored and insecure in the port, caught fire and exploded. We could have mass poisoning events, either intentional or unintentional. Accidents relating to nuclear, biological, chemical or radiological incidents. Issues like pandemics also may be a result, for example, of a biological accident. And we still don't know for sure, for example, where COVID-19 originated in specific detail, whether it came through a wet market or potentially escaped a lab. And there are certainly examples of viruses escaping from labs, including in China in the recent past. And we have other examples, such as the collapse of major structures. And I'm sure that many of you will be able to think of other potential examples of different types of disasters. In our experience and our regional and indeed global experience over the last 20 or so years in particular, what became very apparent, and especially after the Indian Ocean tsunami, was the importance of navies and naval responses to different disaster scenarios. And in particular, the unique capabilities that navies can bring to bear to support damaged areas and communities and indeed countries in distress. And in particular, large amphibious ships were seen to be extremely useful in dealing with the consequences of these disasters, with the types of capabilities that they enjoy, such as ability to move a lot of equipment and supplies, the ability to evacuate people in distress, the ability to operate helicopters and different types of watercraft, medical facilities, and those types of things. And this has been shown again and again throughout the world in response to different disasters. So a couple of different examples. The example in the top two photographs on the slide are from Hurricane Katrina. where US forces and in one case, we have the Mexican Navy in cooperation with the US Navy landing one of their helicopters on a US ship, helping to respond to that particular disaster. And on the bottom of the slide, we have examples of Japan-US cooperation in response to the 2011 Sendai earthquake and tsunami. And again, naval capabilities have been shown to be invaluable in responding to these types of disasters. Some of the different capabilities and value of navies for these humanitarian assistance and disaster relief type operations can be quite wide-ranging. One of the most, I think, important is the ability to base at sea. In many cases, infrastructure on the land may be damaged and unusable. So roads, airports, seaports, and other important infrastructure may not be able to be utilized after a major disaster. And so the ability to base and to operate from the sea in response to HADAR, humanitarian assistance and disaster relief requirements has been very, very important. One very significant aspect to this is the ability to have a very limited footprint, not just in terms of not requiring land-based infrastructure to support sea-based operations, but also from a political perspective. We saw that in Aceh following the 2004 tsunami, where the Achenese did not want foreigners, in particular non-Muslims, basing themselves in the province. And so the ability of responding navies to be sea-based, to do their work during the day and to return to their ships, either by watercraft or by rotorcraft, and back to their ships overnight, was a very important aspect of assuaging any potential political sensitivities. And we've seen this elsewhere as well. For example, one example in Taiwan, which was, was hit quite regularly by typhoons. After one of these typhoons, the US military sent relief supplies. And once again, because of the sensitivity of mainland China to US or other foreign military presence on Taiwan, they were able to sea base and to send helicopters through during the day to provide support. So these sea-based HADAR operations also can provide major logistic support, moving equipment and emergency supplies and response teams to the disaster hit areas. They can undertake rescue operations. They can undertake evacuation operations. Many larger naval ships, and particularly amphibious ships, are capable of undertaking significant medical support and often have inbuilt medical facilities and even hospital facilities. These large ships are capable through their onboard desalination plants to produce potable water, and potable water is often in short supply following a disaster. And so that's a significant capability to be able to supply fresh water. The ability to embark both watercraft, such as landing craft, hovercraft, and rotorcraft, are obviously very important for all of these types of operations. The naval forces also can carry out other related operations, such as damage assessment, and the increasing ability to use unmanned vehicles, especially unmanned aerial vehicles embarked upon the ships, are also another important capability. So these naval capabilities are very specific and unique to navies. No civilian authorities have these particular capabilities. So navies have become extremely important. And one of the things that we saw, particularly in our region following the Indian Ocean tsunami, was that more and more countries have been developing amphibious vessel capabilities. Next, I'd like to establish some of the requirements for naval cooperation in response to these types of disasters. Firstly, it's very important to have existing functioning systems for information exchange and communications between different navies. This was one of the outcomes of a study done by the US Naval War College following the Indian Ocean tsunami. One of the problems encountered during that response was that the navies who were either allies or long-standing coalition partners were easily able to operate with each other. However, some of the other navies who weren't traditional partners of some of those Western navies who were leading some of the response throughout the Indian Ocean were not so easily incorporated into a coordinated response. And so navies have worked hard since that time to improve their ability to operate with other navies, including those who are not close allies or traditional partners. So those communications are become very, very important. The ability to coordinate response between responding navies and other services of militaries and as well as civilian government agencies and international agencies such as those of the United Nations also becomes very, very important. One common problem in response to a number of disasters around the world has been that there have been so many parties that respond to these disasters that there often has been a lack of sufficient coordination amongst the different responders. And so ensuring that there is a pre-established form of coordination when these disasters occur can become very, very important. And then we drill down to that lower level of Navy to Navy cooperation, and where interoperability becomes important, compatibility between different types of vessels and aircraft and so forth become far more important. So it's not just about communications, it's about the compatibility and interoperability of equipment as well. One aspect of this, which is very useful, is to have standardized doctrine for responding to these types of disasters. And there is standard doctrine for these purposes adopted throughout NATO, for example, and this is commonly used amongst many navies around the world. Beyond that, it's important to be able to train together with navies of different countries, and also to exercise these types of responses so that we are not learning on the job once a disaster has happened, but that we already have trained and exercised together so that when a disaster occurs, we can respond very quickly and very effectively. Another element of this is to be able to utilize existing arrangements. We don't necessarily have to reinvent the wheel. So a couple of examples of this are the Changi Regional Haydar Coordination Center in Singapore and the Western and Pacific Naval Symposium's Disaster Response Operations Guide, the DROG, which I think is in at least its second iteration. The Changi Regional Haydar Coordination Center is hosted in the Republic of Singapore Navy's Changi Command and Control Center in Singapore, and which can fuse and distribute situational awareness pictures prior to, during, and after natural disasters. It is somewhat limited in that it tries to coordinate foreign military Haydar assistance. To my knowledge, it doesn't do that with other civilian or international agencies, but it provides a potentially very useful capability in order to minimize duplication and improve that coordination amongst different responding navies. One aspect of the response and the preparation for response to natural and man-made disasters is the importance of national resilience. And one point I would like to make here is the importance on focusing on a generic national resilience. So whilst specific measures may be required in order to plan for and deal with particular threats and risks, it's important not to make the common mistake that militaries often make in terms of planning to fight the last war. That is, in this particular circumstance of disaster response, don't plan only to deal with a reoccurrence of the most recent crisis. And I think this is a potential issue for us here in Australia. We've had a Royal Commission into the bushfires that occurred over the summer, and that's important and has done good work, but national resilience must be more broad than simply dealing with a reoccurrence of a bushfire in the next fire season. We need to be able to protect and quickly restore vital infrastructure such as power grids, but also that vital infrastructure that is required for conducting naval operations. So our bases, our logistics, our headquarters staff, all of those things, and our communications and command facilities must be, if they are damaged, must be stood up again very quickly in order to be able to conduct our naval responses. One further point I'd make, and this applies, I think, to all countries to different degrees, but one that I think is a concern to me currently in Australia is that Defence Force contributions and planning should in the most part be based on specialised support to civilian emergency management agencies in any disaster. It should not plan for the military to be the first responders in most cases. I don't think it's a good idea that we follow the US path, for example, where US National Guard and Army Corps of Engineers are often at the forefront of response to disasters. There's a great potential problem of undermining the central role of our defence forces if we plan to make them primary responders to natural disasters. So lastly, I'd just like to address some of the implications of specifically COVID-19 for navies. And the first of these is the need to ensure operational readiness of our navies. And part of this is to protect naval personnel from the disease, from the pandemic, especially those with an operational role, because that impacts on the viability of naval operations. We saw with, I think, the USS Theodore Roosevelt and other US warships, and I believe the French carrier Charles de Gaulle as well, that the pandemic spread through those vessels very, very quickly. We've already seen the case with cruise ships, and in many cases, naval vessels are even more vulnerable because of the close quarters that naval personnel operate on board a ship. And so protecting those personnel and avoiding using such personnel for land-based pandemic response, I think, is very important, because the jobs of navies do not go away during pandemic. So we need to have specific protocols in place. This may require restrictions on personnel, such as shore leave and those types of things, in order to protect them and ensure the viability of our vessels. We will potentially need contingency planning should situations worsen, and we need to be able to prepare for potential regional security implications and to try to avoid the possibility of the reduced availability of naval vessels. And I'm thinking in particular in our own region about the danger of rogue state adventurism that may seek to take advantage of the COVID-19 pandemic to undertake expansionist type military operations. And that is a particular danger in the current circumstances, and perhaps even more so in the potential uncertainty and instability following the US presidential election. So those are my thoughts on COVID-19 and disaster response and the implications for navies. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Chris Rahman, and please give a big round of applause to him. Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Chris Rahman, for giving such informative and interesting presentations in order to increase our insight of disaster risk management and global pandemic responses, particularly the implications of COVID-19 for navies. Distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, once again, for the online participants, if you have any questions, just write them to the box, to the chat box into your control panel, and our committee will collect and select these questions before state them to the speakers. Well, ladies and gentlemen, now I'm pleased to invite our third speakers in the session, Dr. Sashi Jayakumar, to give his presentations on cyber, media, and information warfare. Please welcome Dr. Sashi.
Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me.
Yeah.
And I'm very pleased to be here. I'm honored to be here. I would like to thank TNI-AL SESKOAL for the invitation to speak. It's a real privilege. I'm going to share my screen now. I hope you can see the screen, but if not, please let me know. I'm going to start my, are you able to see the screen? My slides?
Yes, you can see your slide.
Okay, great.
All right.
So I have a number of slides to go through here, and I want to say that what I want to talk about is social media disinformation and also a little bit about cyber. And this is how I want to frame the issue. So there are a number of points, and I hope I'll be able to get through all my slides. I want to say that the RSIS think tank where I works very closely with Singapore government. However, we do not speak officially for Singapore government. It is more an informed point of view, if you see what I mean, concerning the Singapore perspective on some of these issues. So what exactly is the problem we are talking about? I will talk about rumor and misreporting to some degree, but the real scope of the RSI's concern on these sorts of issues is as part of political machinations or fake news or disinformation which seeks to undermine the social resilience or the democratic process of a state. And this is something which we in Singapore and indeed other countries in the region are very concerned with. So as part of a framing in terms of how we in Singapore look at these issues, I found this particular framework. It's from a paper which you should read. It's online. It's called Information Disorder by two well-known experts. And the misinformation which you see on your left is sometimes unintentional. It's sometimes quite often harmless. It's got no real serious effect. It's the disinformation that we are really concerned with, because this can undermine the social polity, the social fabric of the state. There's a third one which you can see on the screen, which is malinformation. And I will say that this third definition has not universally been accepted by experts who look at these sorts of issues. But we do find that this kind of framing is quite useful for us to be able to think about these sets of issues. Of course, when we think about disinformation or online social media subversion, quite often we think about maybe what Russia has done, what other countries are alleged to have done, US elections 2016 and so on. But I do want to say that there are numerous examples of this happening much closer to home. So I'm not sure if you remember this from about 2 years ago, when there were spate in various states of India of rumors concerning child abductions, of gentlemen in a white van going around various states in India. And this actually went viral across India, and a number of people who were suspected of being child abductors were actually brutally killed, even though they were completely blameless. And what was happening there is that many of the rumors were circulating by WhatsApp, and a total of 14 people got killed because they were falsely accused of being child abductors. This is what happens when social media, in particular WhatsApp, to some degree Telegram, penetrates into levels of society which are perhaps not so social media literate, which have difficulties getting used to this flood of information, and they therefore tend to overreact, especially if they're not taught social media hygiene. It's also happened in a slightly different way, slightly closer to home. I think many of us are familiar with the name Cambridge Analytica, but I did want to point out that among the less well-known accusations which was leveled at Cambridge Analytica was the allegation that they had been hired by political players to influence state-level elections in Malaysia. And we in Singapore are concerned because if political players start to try to do this kind of thing, maybe from outside the country, try to influence elections in Singapore, this can have potentially serious effects. And this is something which the various agencies are looking quite closely at. And again, I'm not sure how many of you remember this. This is again from 2018, where Twitter was flooded by the creation of online bot armies, where to me, the real lesson is that simply because Cambridge Analytica has been exposed, it doesn't mean that there aren't others out there. No one really knows who was behind this flood of bot armies created just at the time in 2018, when there were to be several elections in Southeast Asian countries, including Malaysia, including Cambodia. It might be state-sponsored, it might be linked to domestic politicking, but this is the background. This is the kind of things that are quite worrying and which do go on, surprisingly, quite close to home. I think many of us are familiar with the evolution, maybe more familiar than I am, with the evolution of military doctrine when it comes to information over the decades. But I did want to point out that there are certain key tenets which have become increasingly accepted. And I'm not going to read to you all of this by two noted Russian military theorists, but the basic point is that before the actual kinetic warfare takes place, you use non-military actions and measures to attack the victim using every single technology you have at your disposal. And these technologies need not necessarily be military. They can be using social media, using proxies, using front organizations, and so on. And I think we need to understand that information warfare or social media manipulation is one facet of this new generation hybrid warfare. And it's not just the Russians who think this way. If you look at a noted editorial by a PLA, Chinese People's Liberation Army, and I think I wanted to include this because this very much encapsulates what the developments of doctrine have been over the past years. The internet has grown into an ideological battlefield, and whoever controls the tools will win the war. I think this is quite a fitting summary in terms of what is going on when it comes to using and deploying social media means to affect target countries, to affect your adversaries. So when we talk about state-sponsored subversion, fake news, online disinformation, I think a lot of us will actually think about US 2016 and allegedly what also happened at the midterm elections in the US in 2018. What we do know is that some of the Russian attempts to manipulate the resilience of the United States meant that they fed the energies, the negative energies of not just the right or the far right, which I think we all know about, but also the left as well. And this was one of the key findings. So some of these fake pages or groups actually attracted real people who were very energized, who were very upset, who got very worked up enthusiastically by these fake news. So over time, if you look at the third bullet point, which is the important one, the controllers from other countries or the people actually manipulating were able to play not so active a role. So this is quite important because real people got involved as a result of these fake machinations. And here are actually a couple of examples. You've got a movement, and this is completely fake, by the way, from 2018, which was around the time of the midterms, which shows Black Elevation, which is ostensibly a Black group meant to support Black rights in that country in protest against police brutality and so on and so forth. It appeared to be an organization that was devoted to fighting racism, and it garnered tens of thousands of people who visited its page. Likewise, the Remember Michael Brown, which was an event, and the organizers from outside the country of this fake event actually nominated or hired people in real life to get their event off the ground. And this is actually something of a first, because it's quite extraordinary that people trying to undermine the resilience of a state are actually able to manipulate people in this way. So this is another example, and I think it's useful because people got so energized that the outside manipulators were able to get protests and counter-protests. This is in Texas in May 2016, and allegedly actually orchestrated by Kremlin trolls 5,000 miles away. And the first protest, which is called Stop Islamicization of Texas, was organized by a Facebook group with more than 250,000 followers, and the group was called Heart of Texas. And there was a counter protest. But the real point is that what neither side knew was that Russian trolls were encouraging both sides to battle on the streets and create division amongst real Americans. And this is what organized state-sponsored subversion can do. So you've got these developments, and of course, we've been following the US election very, very closely. And of course, there have been increasing sophistication on the part of the organized subversive actors. There have been cyber attacks. They've also become much more savvy in terms of disguising their bot armies or their troll armies. But one of the points, you can see this from a New York Times article just a few days ago. One of the main points I want to make is this sense of perception hacks, because most of the experts have agreed that for the 2020 presidential elections, attempts by the Kremlin actually have not been that effective. But they have been effective in one seemingly small way, which is to give the adversary the sense that you are in their systems, in their technical systems, but in their minds as well. So you've got more psychological than real effect. So you give the impression that you are inside their systems and capable of undermining confidence in the electoral and the democratic system. And I think this kind of perception hack, the idea that the enemy is in your head and in your systems, is something we need to be very careful about. Because on the part of the aggressor, it can be done at scale for comparatively little cost. So I think I would be remiss. I think I really should also share a little bit about actual hacks. And I want to point out that for the DNC leaks, which were shared by Julian Assange's group and others, and by Russian military operatives, they were only able to do this as a result of an actual hack. In other words, the subversion was only enabled because someone in the Democratic National Convention, John Podesta, was able to click on a phishing email. So it's quite often the case that when we study these issues, that the cyber attack coalesces or merges with a subversion or social media manipulation attack. It's only a result of clicking for this email that 50,000 emails were handed over to the Russians. And of course, I don't mean simply to pick on Russia, but this is the GRU activities are some of those which have been the best identified. So the targets include Ukraine, but also police in Malaysia investigating claims that the Russians had shot down MH17, if you recall, killing 300 passengers. And the hacking missions have on some occasions been exposed, but these are the only ones which have been exposed. We have to assume that they've got away with a lot more. And I don't want to give you the impression that it's just big states which are able to get away with this kind of thing. In fact, asymmetric warfare, social media attacks, online disinformation, and cyber is a classic way in which a small to medium-sized state can actually exponentially increase its power. And I think it would not escape those of us who are following the US election that the Iranians have been repeatedly figured in the past few days, not just for attempted hacks. If you look at the first part of the article right at the top, Iranian hackers have been suspected, and this is quite clever, of posing as Proud Boys, which is the far-right group, almost endorsed by President Trump, and sending threatening emails in their own effort to do voter suppression, trying to get them not to vote. This is quite interesting. So there are many powers, and I don't mean to just pick on one power involved. Okay, so I finished the first part, but I do want to stress that this concerns Singapore as well, because we have a very, very wired country. We're going to be a smart nation, very connected. So we consider ourselves also at risk. So what do we face? I think for those of you who follow Singapore quite closely, you'll be aware of some of this. Firstly, there's the just general fake news created by people. And the lady in this question was arrested because she had mental health problems in February 2018. She left a note suggesting that the water in one part of Singapore had been poisoned. Of course, this is fake, but it can be capable of sowing panic in the minds of the people. And I want to highlight this case because a lot of the so-called fake news that we see in Singapore is actually lower order level. It's actually this kind of activity, which seems rather harmless, it seems a bit silly, but has the potential to undermine public confidence in the authorities. So for some reason worldwide, whenever we look at these child kidnapping rumors, it's always a white van. And I will be interested to see whether this is the case in Indonesia as well. But you have this false news about alleged white van going around schools, preying on our children, abducting them. Completely false, of course. But the problem is that once this spreads on WhatsApp, especially on the family WhatsApp group, which you cannot exit, obviously, it spreads like wildfire and it preys on our fears. So that's the lower order. I would say this is entry level. But there's a more serious kind of disinformation or fake news. And these are two Singaporeans. One is an Australian, actually, the lady, Aitakagi. She's of Japanese origin, who had a website which is called The Real Singapore. And they were able to monetize through the Google ads simply because they put in a lot of information and news, which they invented themselves, but it seemed to be real news about friction or arguments or fights between Singaporeans and foreigners. And in one case, this is again from their website, Thaipusam, which is a well-known festival celebrated by Indians, or Hindus, sorry, there was this sense that there was going to be a riot, which is completely false. And the news that they created, which seemed to be real news, it was not, actually netted them a lot of money because they were able to monetize the ad revenue. In fact, they were able to put a down payment on the mortgage for their house. So they were arrested because under Singapore law, it was said that they were charged in court with subversion. They were subverting the state and causing friction and ill will between various groups in Singapore, solely by fake news. Now, why do we take this so seriously? I don't mean to give you a history lesson, and that's not what we're here for. But if you know the history of Singapore, there have been riots in 1964, 1969, and quite often these are spillover of tensions from across the causeway, from Malaysia. And the issues have to do with Malay rights or people bringing in their politics in Singapore. So from the beginning, the Singapore government has understood that ethnic and religious harmony is paramount. And anyone trying to upset this harmony gets very severely dealt with. So that's the history. And I don't want to spend too much time on the history, but you understand why I give you these past examples in Singapore, because there were many, many examples. Some I shared, some I don't have time to share with you. And this sort of caused public alarm, it exploited fault lines, and it reached the level where the issue was brought up in Parliament in 2018. What was the commonality in all these cases? It was the internet and social media. So Singapore has to be an open society. This is why we are successful. It has to be open to information. But what can we do to treat this threat of fake news, which is beginning to undermine public confidence? So in 2018, there was a parliamentary select committee, a high-level select committee, where various experts, academics, myself, my colleagues, including Facebook, whom you can see in the picture, presented all sides of the story and gave suggestions on what should be done. It was a very significant committee because one of the key suggestions as a report from the report, which is online, by the way, you can find the report of the committee online, was that we should have a sort of a law. And there's since been a law. It's the Protection Against Online Falsehoods Act. It's the Singapore Fake News Law, if you like. But what is very important and what sometimes gets forgotten was that the mechanisms that were suggested by the committee were not simply legal. It was promoting fact-checking and nurturing more education. And Chris Rahman, who was speaking just now, talked about resilience. And a key point from the committee's report was that, look, besides law, you also need the reinforcement of social cohesion and trust, such that everyone gets along better and connects better with each other, makes you more resilient to fake news and disinformation. So that's the law, which I can talk about during the Q&A. I will not do so now, but I will stress that at the time when the law was introduced late last year, there was a tremendous sort of discussion and there was some protests from the social media company. But I think that if the intention is to incite feelings of enmity, hatred, or ill will between different groups or to diminish public confidence in Singapore, then what the law says is that you can be charged in court. However, I cannot pretend, and I don't think the authorities would say that this has stamped out all the fake news in Singapore, because actually, since or at around the time of the discussion of the law, there were other fake news pieces achieving wide circulation. For example, a mass brawl, which is alleged to show foreign workers, which actually didn't happen in Singapore at all. And the circulation of a video alleging to show a collapse in Changi Airport actually did not happen in Changi Airport as well. So my thinking is that for some of these cases, the law needs some time to take an effect, needs some time to catch the people responsible. What is more effective is effective fact-checking and effective rebuttal. I mentioned that we have this plan to be a smart nation, which was announced 6 years ago. Singapore is going to be very, very open. It's going to be connected in all kinds of interesting ways through technology, through 5G, through AI. So we are on this path, and what this means is that we cannot simply try to wall ourselves or seal ourselves off from data and information. It also means that we are vulnerable and our networks are vulnerable. And I did say that besides social media, I did want to talk about cyber attacks as well. And Singapore has suffered many cyber hacks. There have been hacks against the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, against the Ministry of Defense, but the most well-known one took place in 2017, 2018 against SingHealth, which is a provider which stores a lot of our health information. And you can see that the data of 1.5 million patients was exfiltrated. And within that, the attacker persistently targeted the information of our Prime Minister 3 times, Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong. The Committee of Inquiry report, which looked at the incident, highlighted a series of technical failures and also human failures. So there was a lack of resilience on both sides. And the committee did not name the state actor responsible, but it did say that it was an advanced persistent threat actor. So this is unlikely to have been an ordinary criminal syndicate. And I think in time to come, the Cybersecurity Agency will need to, and it has been taking measures to buffer or to solidify our cyber resilience. And this needs to be done not just for misinformation, but the point of this slide, for cyber as well. So I'm going to skip a couple of slides because I'm running short of time, but I did want to talk about some of the wider issues involved when it comes to disinformation and fake news. We have a law, as I've just explained, against fake news, but it seems very much that this is not the end of the story for Singapore. And government officials, including our law minister, he's formerly the foreign minister, Minister Shanmugam, have said that we probably need a bigger law to look at foreign interference. So if you like, disinformation, fake news, subversion is a subset of the bigger issue, foreign interference. And I think there are various countries, I believe Australia, which have actually measures against foreign interference, because the wider game of foreign interference can undermine the state, undermine resilience, and social media manipulation is simply one of them. Other methods can be bribing politicians or using proxies, using cultural fronts or NGOs, or infiltrating academic networks. So it's multifarious and multifaceted. Singapore, it seemed that they were about to introduce this law, but the bill has not come out yet. So it will be interesting to discuss within the Singapore context, or even whether Indonesia is looking at the same issue from a legislative perspective. What might be within the law? Might it look at the funding of websites? Might it seek to restrict the activities of social media companies in Singapore even further? Or might it cover other forms of international and domestic espionage? So I think this is really the next step, the next case for Singapore. We have made many contacts and trips in order to understand what other countries have done, what other countries have done well in terms of combating foreign interference, foreign influence, and social media manipulation. And I think it's well worth looking at the French example, because at the French presidential election 3 years ago, it really looked as if the Russians, I'm guessing the Russians, although this is an allegation which has not been proved, were trying to undermine the chances of now President Macron. And when we talk to the French, as we have done, in terms of what they did, they were aware of this threat, and they feel that they were able to have a system that was more centralized, a system that was able to coordinate a single response. There was not one single agency or institution in charge of protecting elections integrity. There was a cyber agency, there were the security agencies, the intelligence services. So the hackers actually did exfiltrate some information and sought to release the information, hoping that it will be politically explosive for President Macron's electoral process. But from the French point of view, this exploded in their own faces. So from the French point of view, electoral candidates were briefed about the threat. They were briefed about adopting better cybersecurity practices. They were briefed about not to fall into the trap by these online actors, by adversaries. And therefore, the French, most importantly, feel that culturally, because they have a national history of culturally critical thinking and emotional skepticism, they feel that they were able to withstand this threat quite well. And I think this is an important point to make, because this undermines the fact that a law is not necessarily 100% foolproof bullet in order to withstand this kind of subversion attack. Multifaceted, multi-agency perspective is necessary, along with improving national resilience. How about Singapore? How do we prepare? Well, here are pictures of a well-known exercise. It's a counter-terror exercise involving various agencies. It's called Exercise North Star. We've done this for a number of years. We do not have a long history of facing acts of war or natural disasters, but I think our drills are reasonably good. But how do you apply these drills or this thinking to cyber and misinformation, which is a key issue? Well, if you look at the total defense concept, for the first time, the first addition to total defense concept in something like 25 years, you now for the first time have digital added to total defense. So agencies will come together to jointly discuss, including the cyber agency, including the security agencies, Ministry of Information, how we can shore up our digital resilience. And it's important to note that our military has also begun to think very, very seriously about how we deal with fake news and disinformation. And I think it's quite eye-opening that all recruits going through military training will have to attend an information literacy workshop to teach them how to deal with fake news and deliberate online falsehoods. More details have not yet been announced, but I think this is something quite important because, as you know, in Singapore, we have national service. So all able-bodied males will be able to partake in this educated process. And I think that's quite important because Singapore's need is to have a strong military deterrent. The second minister, at that time, the second minister for defense, Ong Ye Kung, also talked about sort of a separate issue, which is getting people with some technical knowledge, technical skills when they go into the military or national service, right? How you get them to be in a new vocation, which is now called cyber NSF, national service, or cyber defenders. And in this, we're not really doing anything new. We're doing something which has been tried by various other armed forces. But it's quite important because I think many of you in the audience know that quite often military is privileged, the special forces, the Navy, the commandos, or an armed service. And to get the cyber vocation up to the level where it's seen as to be doing important work on par, comparable with these other branches of the military, is going to take some time. There have been, I'm coming to the end now because I've taken up a lot of time. There have been developments, and I try to hint at these in terms of technical developments, and these have to do with deepfakes. And I think those seeking to avoid fact checkers, those seeking to avoid scrutiny of Facebook or Telegram are going to improve their algorithms as well. But most importantly, I think it's the first point. PR companies' manipulation for hire has become a new gray area where people seeking to subvert the state, subvert their adversaries, are using semi-legitimate front companies. And sometimes these companies, social media consultancies, don't even know what they are, what their actual client is. And critical thinking, I've already talked about. It is very important to build media literacy and critical thinking. And the OECD has talked about this. In Singapore, there are efforts, which I'm happy to talk about during the Q&A, by our education ministry to instill critical thinking, to be able to spot fake news in school. So I'm going to end here by talking about some final thoughts. Quite often, the target is unconscious. You don't realize you are actually the victim of a multi-dimensional campaign. Therefore, cooperation across government, public sector is going to be very, very important. But you see the problem here, and I think I've hinted at some of this earlier. You see the problem, you see fake news, it's undermining your state, and then you try to take action either by fact-checking or by a law. But this is not necessarily the best way. And some of the countries which do this best, in Northern Europe and the Baltic countries, are good at pre-bunking. If you understand what I mean by pre-bunking, you inoculate the people even before the fake news takes hold in your mind, takes root in the society. But this can only be done in a nation which has a high level of trust. And it's on that point, on the underlying trust, that I'm going to end my presentation. And I want to thank you very much for your attention.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Sashi, for your great presentations. And now we have insightful thoughts on emerging challenges in cyber, media, and information domains, including how it could affect maritime security. Well, very well, ladies and gentlemen, moving along to our sessions. Now we are going to have a discussion. There will be 2 sessions, depending on the time we will have at a time, and each session is for 3 questions. To anyone here in SESKOAL who have questions, would you please to raise your hand and mention your name, rank, and state to which presenter you address your questions. Please do. Okay. Microphone, please. Yeah, can we start from behind, yeah? Okay, please.
Thank you, good moderator. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I am Lieutenant Commander Tatang Jenderal Stanto, the Student Officer of Staff and Command College. This question is for Dr. Sasi Jayakumar. Good morning, sir. Based on our topic about cooperation in the future, and your topic about the cyber defense, my question is how cyber defense can be implemented on our cooperation between countries in a region. Because on the other hand, in my thought, when we look at the cyber defense, of course, it reflects to the national security, national interest, or even national confidentiality, and also cyber capability of its nation. Thank you. That is my question, sir.
Thank you, Lieutenant Commander Tatang. Now for the next questions. Yeah, please.
Check. Good morning, sir. I am Lieutenant Commander Gautam Rai from the Indian Navy. I've got two questions actually. One is for Dr. Chris Rahman, and the second one is for Mr. Shashi Jayakumar. The first question for Dr. Chris Rahman is that, sir, as you have covered in the presentation, most of the navies in the region regard benign role, which include HADR, as very important for in their overall scheme of operation. However, when we look at some of the multilateral exercises which the navies have conducted, especially with those exercises which are conducted along with the civilian agencies like the Changi Regional HADR Center or the AHA, the ASEAN Humanitarian Assistance, we find these exercises are far and few. As far as I know of, one in 2017 in Singapore and one in 2019 in Malaysia. So my question specifically is, sir, that do you think that the level of cooperation between the navies in the region and the civilian agencies which are responsible for disaster relief, is it sufficient at the moment? And if not, what are the measures which the countries and the navies can take to increase this cooperation in the future? That's the first question, so thank you. The second question for Mr. Shashi Jayakumar is that, as you have covered in the presentation, with the advent of social media, the means to undertake information warfare, more particularly cyber warfare, have increased for adversaries and enemies of the state. In the recent times, we have seen that many of the eminent personalities have also engaged in spread of misinformation, or, as you have correctly brought out, sir, disinformation on social media platforms. The response of the social media platforms like Facebook, Twitter have been very slow, sluggish, laggard to say the least, to fact check as and when these disinformation are propagated on those mediums. My question is, sir, that what are the options which are available with the nations to put a check on spread of disinformation through these social media platforms? Are these social media platforms, can they be held accountable? And what are the steps which have been taken by Singapore in particular as far as putting a check on disinformation is concerned? Thank you.
Thank you, Lieutenant Commander Gautam. And for the last questions, yes, please.
The Honorable ladies and gentlemen, thank you, moderator, for opportunity. I am Major Marines Ahmad Haris, student officer from Command and Staff College. I have 3 questions for each speaker. My first question for Rear Admiral, for first speaker. Could you explain more detail? How does the cooperation between Indonesian Navy and regional navies, especially with neighboring countries that have border problem with Indonesia, for detecting, preventing, and also to enforcement transnational organized crime? And my second question for Dr. Chris Rahman, second speaker. In 2011, Association of Southeast Asian Nation or ASEAN established a disaster mitigation agency called AHA to assist member countries experiencing natural disaster. You explained in your presentation that in 2014, there is a Changi Regional HADR Coordination Center was established. My question is, what are the superiority of the Changi Regional HADR Coordination Center when we compare with HAH from ASEAN? And my third question for third speaker, Dr. Sasi Jayakumar, what of government policies are appropriate for dealing with cyber warfare, media and information, especially for countries which consisting of various ethnic, religious, and groups? What's your opinion, sir? Thank you.
Thank you so much to Dr. Karis. To the honorable all speakers, please kindly answer to the following questions, starting from Dr. Sashi. Questions from Lieutenant Commander Tatang. Please, Dr. Sashi.
Thanks. There are a number of questions which have been raised, and also a question in the chat as well. And some of these questions are sort of similar, or they pick up on connecting themes. So let me try to take up some of these issues. And I'll deal with the last question, which has just been asked. The government policy is appropriate for dealing with cyber warfare, especially in a multicultural country. This is a great question, and my impression is that the Singapore authorities are actually very, very concerned about this, because you understand how Singapore feels. We are a country, but we're not just any country. Depending on which survey you look at, we are actually the most diverse country on earth, if you look at the languages, religions, and races which are used. So in other words, from the adversary perspective, if you're trying to get into the minds of the people of the country to undermine the resilience using, let's say, perception hacks, you have a huge threat surface. You have a huge target area, because the issues you can possibly try to inflame could include issues pertaining to race, and there have been riots on this issue before, or religion, or you try to look at other conflicting issues in Singapore society. For example, the role of foreigners in Singapore society, which has become a big issue. Now, of course, you can have laws, and we do have fake news laws, a fake news law, which I can talk about. But I will also say that Singapore has extremely strict laws, and these strict laws have been there for a number of decades. Some of these laws have actually been left to us by the British. For example, when you look at extremist radicals from the age of Jamaah Islamiyah and so on, and ISIS, of course, this is a completely different issue, but we have detention without trial, which we do use for terror suspects. Of course, you can say, well, wait a second, terrorism is different. But I would suggest to you that the polarization or the echo chambers or the filter bubbles that some of these individuals go through when it comes to fake news is not that similar when you're on the pathway to becoming an extremist. I shared with you the website of the two individuals just now, a Singaporean and an Australian lady, the Real Singapore. They made a lot of money by peddling or creating fake news. The law which was used against them was a hard-hitting, heavy-hitting law. It wasn't the fake news law. It was actually the law on subversion, which was, again, is a very, very old law, which has been left to us by the British. So I would say that in Singapore, any threats to the multicultural makeup of the country are taken very, very seriously. There was another question in terms of the question that was asked before that, in terms of cyber warfare and what social media companies can and should be doing. I completely agree that they have been laggards. I would also say that they have got a little bit better over the years. If you look at the ways that they've responded to completely false tweets by Donald Trump, for example, in the past few days, that's one example. But if you look at the takedowns of white supremacist groups and the misinformation they peddle in North America, in the United States, that's also another example. So I think they've become somewhat better. But from the point of view of the country, which feels that it is at war with misinformation, that's probably not going to be enough. So in the Singapore fake news law, if something is found to be false and there's a correction direction, meaning, at least in the Singapore law, Facebook doesn't have to take it down, but it has to put up a correction next to it saying the government feels that this is false. And I think this is very, very useful, because you don't want to use a sledgehammer every time you see a fly. You want to kill a fly. So the misinformation in some cases is actually allowed to remain up on the Singapore law, so long as the corrective is posted there as well. If Facebook or the social media platform refuses to put up the corrective, the one I just described, you face a fine. And I think this is very much in keeping with the Singapore spirit, which I tried to describe to you. We're going to be a very open society, even more open than we are now. And over time, I think we probably come to realize you can't seek to use very heavy instruments or try to simply ban or censor. I think I've answered 2 questions, but I think there may be others as well. So moderator, please feel free to let me know if there are further clarifications which need to be given.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Sashi. Now we come to our next questioner from Lieutenant Commander Gautam from India. He has 2 questions. First for Dr. Chris Rahman, and next for you, Dr. Sashi. Would you please to answer the questions?
I'm going to was this the question on the APT threats? Because there has been one question on APT threats. If I'm not a moderator, I would appreciate it if you could summarize the question again.
Okay. Maybe you can repeat your questions again.
Thank you, sir. You have already answered my question. The second question was mine. So I've already understood that, as you have brought out, sir, that in the recent times, although the situation as far as the social media platforms are concerned has increased, has improved considerably with a bit of fact checking being done, but there is still scope for improvement. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, please, Dr. Sashi, would you please to answer the questions?
Could the question which has not been answered, could I kindly request, if you do not mind, that the question which has not been answered, could that be repeated?
So is it satisfied, the answer? Okay. Pak Tatang, are you satisfied with the answer for Dr. Sashi? Yes, it's clear, Dr. Sashi.
Thank you.
Now we come to Dr. Chris Rahman. The questions are from Lieutenant Commander Gautam. Would you please to answer the questions, Dr. Chris Rahman?
Right, thanks for the questions. The first question related to whether was HADR cooperation sufficient and what measures can improve this. I don't think the issue is so much sufficiency. It's about how we can continually improve based on our previous experience, because every disaster is going to be different. Every requirement will have its own specific demands. So I think the broader issue is to continue to improve our ability to work together as navies. And the best way to do this is to be able to train and to exercise responses to these types of HADR contingencies on a regular basis. Now, of course, exercises are expensive, particularly when you're involving ships and aircraft, and our navies are pretty stretched in terms of their annual calendars for these types of programs, but it is incumbent upon us to ensure that we are that we can cooperate on the water, at sea, as easily as possible and as effectively as possible for all future contingencies. So it's about doing this stuff and repetition and ensuring that we continually keep up to date with current communications channels and technologies and so forth, that we can all use the same systems to work together in response to these types of disasters. The second question was about the ASEAN AHA versus the Changi RHCC. And I'm not that familiar with the AHA, but the benefit of the Changi facility is that it is a naval facility. And so you have at Changi Command and Control Center, not just the Republic of Singapore Navy that hosts it, but all those international liaison officers, ILOs from other regional navies. And it's far more operational focused. And remember, response to disasters is an operational activity. And so it's not primarily a diplomatic activity or an international political activity. It has those aspects, but primarily the actual response at sea and from the sea is an operational activity. And you need people who are from navies or other services of the military who understand how military organizations work and are able to communicate directly with their own navies and other services in terms of improving cooperation and coordination. I think that's the benefit of an arrangement like the Changi one. It's like other aspects of regional maritime security cooperation. For example, whether it's, say, maritime domain awareness cooperation, it's an operational level activity. And so ultimately, if it's going to be effective, then you require the operators to be able to work together directly, not through some laborious political chain of command that goes through, foreign ministries and other organizations. So I hope that answers the questions.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Chris Rahmat. I hope the answer meet the questions you asked. Okay, now we have the last questions from Lieutenant Commander Ahmad Haris. He has 3 questions for each presenters. Could you please to answer first, First Admiral Denny Hendrata for the first question.
Thank you, moderator. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. A very good morning to distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, on behalf of Ashintel Kasal, or Assistant of Intelligence of Chief of Staff of Indonesian Navy, I would like to introduce myself. My name is Denny Hendrata, First Admiral. I'm acting as Vice of Assistant of Intelligence. I would like to send my deepest gratitude to SESKOAL Commander, Rear Admiral Iwan Isnurwanto. Good morning, sir, for hosting this international seminar excellently. And also, I would like to greet all the speakers and experts. Your Honor, Admiral Retired Professor Dr. Marsutio. Good morning, sir. Dr. Chris Rahman, Dr. Sasi Jayakumar, and Dr. Insinyur Dwi Suryo Indroyono Susilo, MSc. As we can see before on the pillar, they are all expert based on their education and experience, especially in maritime security issues. We all hope that after this seminar, all the participants will get a better understanding about Indonesian Navy objectives and tasks in tackling transnational organized crime activity in the region. I believe it's enough for the introduction. Now let's move forward to the first question from Lieutenant Commander Zhao Zhao Kiao from Myanmar Navy. Thank you for your concern about both people. It has been our concern as well here. For the record, Indonesian didn't recognize United Nations Convention 1941 about refugees and Protocol 1967. Although Indonesia has not yet ratified the 1951 Refugee Convention, Indonesia has a long tradition of accepting refugees and people in need of international protection. Recently, based on humanitarian consideration, Indonesia government accommodated them temporarily. However, Indonesia emphasized that the root problems or core issues of this situation must be resolved. Secondly, I would like to answer the question from Major Marinir Haris. As Asintel Kasal presentation that the maritime threats are increasingly sophisticated, lethal, and transnational. I will give an example in the case that happened in Somalia. The response to Somali piracy underscores the necessity of the collaboration, though partnering is equally valuable to address, among other threats, weapon smuggling, drug traffickers, and fishing incursions occurring globally. Coordination in the maritime domain is particularly crucial because illicit activity unfolds in an environment that is complex and enormous, with overlapping national authorities, gaps in the jurisdiction, and the involvement of multiple agencies. Thus, we can copy that method in our region to tackling in the TOC illegal activity. For example, recap border patrol, Indonesia liaison officer in Singapore IFC. Lastly, I would like to give my regards to all past SESKOAL, batch 58, smart, brave, and excellent. I wish all you have succeeded in ending this course with a good international relationship, experience, and knowledge that useful for the next career. Remember, as an officer that graduates from SESKOAL, the Center of Excellence, firmly Hot Dharma Wiratama, serve with the best deeds of excellent officers. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you very much, Admiral. Now we will come to Dr. Chris Rahman for the second question. Question comes from Lieutenant Commander Ahmad Haris. Please, Dr. Chris Rahman.
Can you repeat the question, please?
Okay, please repeat your question, please.
Okay, sir. In 2011, Association of Southeast Asian Nation or ASEAN established a disaster mitigation agency called the AHA Center to assist member countries experiencing natural disaster. In your explanation, you said that in 2014, the Changi Regional HADR Coordination Center was established also. My question is, what are the superiority of the Changi Regional HADR Coordination Center when we compare with AHA from ASEAN? You got my point, sir.
Yeah, I thought I'd answered that before, but I'll reiterate that the AHA, to my understanding, is a government-to-government arrangement within ASEAN, but the Changi Command and Control Centre is far more operationally focused and is Navy to Navy and involves coordination of specifically Navy and military responses to HADR contingencies. And let's remember that the actual response for navies in particular is an operational activity. And so the international liaison officers, ILOs, which who man the Changi Centre from numerous countries, including Indonesia, are best placed to communicate amongst each other and then back to their home navies to coordinate naval and military responses, because they are the operators and they are undertaking an operational level activity. So it's particularly important that they can do that in a direct way rather than having to go through diplomatic channels, which is a very laborious process. And you often then get problems of dealing with people who do not understand the operational environment. So I hope that answers your question.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Puris Rahman. Now, would you kindly answer the questions, Dr. Sashi, for the last questions from Lieutenant Commander Harris? Please, Dr. Sashi.
I apologize, ma'am. I might have to ask for a repeat of that question again, if that's okay.
Okay, Lieutenant Commander Harris, are you okay for? Yes, please.
Yes. My third question is, what kind of government policies are appropriate for dealing with the cyber warfare, media and information, especially for a country which consisting of various ethnic, religious and groups? What's your opinion, sir?
Yes, thank you for your question.
Thank you, sir.
I would underline a point I made earlier in the presentation. I think we all appreciate that laws are necessary. So Singapore has a fake news law, but we are not alone, of course. The Germans have a law, the French have a law, and in fact, within the ASEAN region, the Thais and the Vietnamese have laws. These are actually cyber bills. So in these two countries, they are not called fake news law, but they are quite broadly worded. So various forms of offenses when it comes to information manipulation can be caught within these laws, but that's at the top level. That's legislation. I did want to highlight something which I did not have time to talk about in depth during my presentation, and that is the anti-hoax effort. And I believe Indonesia actually does reasonably well in these efforts. You have an outfit like Mafindo, and I think you have others as well. Important during a time of COVID, but important generally speaking. And why do I say this? Because if you have trusted institutions from the ground, from a ground up level, which are using grassroots volunteers and people who are motivated, they could be motivated by patriotism or they could be motivated by other reasons. who find it very important to use their own virality, their own viral networks to defeat a kind of fake news which is going viral. I think this is very, very important. And in fact, if you look at some of the countries that we have studied very, very closely, the Baltic countries, for example, who are obviously a bit different because they face an adversary on their doorstep, a big country. You know what that country is. So the ability of the people to be in close confidence with the government and the government to take the people into close confidence, and you do not try to have panic, you do not try to have paranoia, but the government says, look, there's this threat. We need everyone to do your part. And some of these people are motivated by their patriotic duty to join the cyber vocation in the military, or they devolve to form guerrilla outfits which are dedicated to fighting the spread of fake news. And because they're passionate, motivated, and committed, they are quite often able to do that much more than even the government can do. And the reason why I mention this point is because Singapore has a law, we have a good and effective cyber agency, we have an effective information ministry, we have attempts to instill critical thinking and a healthy skepticism within the school syllabus, which is ongoing. But that last part, the ability to act in a guerrilla or even a devolved fashion at the ground level, the people level, is still something that we are maybe lacking a little bit, still something which needs to be worked on. And in my own studies of various countries which have tackled this problem, that's something which is sometimes the most important thing.
Okay, Dr. Chris, Dr. Sashi, and also for was Intel, I expect the questioner fully accept the question. Now we have questions from Colonel Rio Henry Muko from 2nd Fleet Command. The questions for Dr. Chris Rahman. As mentioned in the presentation, that one of the challenges in HADR is so many parties involved, which means challenge for coordinating and synergizing efforts. Can you share your knowledge on RHCC? How does RHCC work in relation with AHA Center, Asian HADR Center? And how do you think the best way to integrate the use of military assets for HADR effort in the Asian region? That's the question, Dr. Chris Rahman. Maybe you can respond to this question, please, Dr. Chris.
Yeah, that's very similar to the last question. It's important to understand the specific roles of different arrangements, and that just to stress that the RHCC is focused on coordinating the responses by different military organizations from different countries. And so it's about coordination to ensure that there's not duplication of effort, and that there are not gross inefficiencies, or that different navies or militaries are trying to provide the same particular service or response and get in each other's way, or provide too many supplies, or whatever the situation may be. So it's specifically about that military to military coordination at the operational level. There are, of course, it doesn't deal, to my knowledge, with other types of agencies. So the civilian agencies, the international agencies through different United Nations bodies, or as well all the different non-governmental organizations that tend to turn up, sometimes uninvited, in response to these disasters. And that can create some significant problems, because they often don't have they may have some people and some money, but they don't have the logistics capabilities, and they require military assistance in many cases to actually employ their own expertise and resources. That is where there are where the sort of ASEAN AHA comes into play, and other arrangements, either on a bilateral or multilateral means through potentially United Nations organizations, but it can get very messy. And that is both in the initial response, but also in the long-term recovery as well. But once you start to move into dealing with these other agencies, this is where you need your diplomatic services and be able to negotiate at that political level. But once an instruction has gone down to the military, and to navies specifically, they need that operational level ability to coordinate on a very, often on a very quick, speedy basis. And that requires them to be able to cooperate and coordinate together without having recourse to constantly ask permission from their political superiors. That is the nature of the operational environment for all aspects of maritime security.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Sashi. And I hope that the answer fulfilled your questions. We still received some questions from participant online. The second question comes from Tajar. It's from Lemhanas for Dr. Chris Rahman and Dr. Sashi Jayakumar. As we know, the maritime threat not only a disaster or kind of accident by human or by nature. In our region, as archipelagic state, we have many challenges such as piracy, illegal fishing, navigation security, and any transnational crime through the sea and claiming about its territory as well. As Asian community, we have problem over South China Sea that is claimed particularly by China as China territory. So we want to know from your perspective how to overcome these situations. Maybe we can starting from Dr. Sashi Jayakumar to answer this question, please.
Thank you. The question is not necessarily an easy one to answer. I understand that part of it is on Indonesia's archipelagic sense of vulnerability. And part of it, as I understand it, is on perceptions of China. But is there a specific part that the questioner would like me to answer? Could I request some clarification?
Okay, Dr. Sashi, it's your perspective. Now come to Dr. Chris Rahman. So what's your perspective, how to come over these situations?
Yeah, I think, thank you. The question obviously hits on a number of important contexts for maritime security in our region. And that one is the archipelagic nature, not just of Indonesia, but of much of the region, which makes it a very difficult place to surveil and to enforce your jurisdiction. And of course, in areas where jurisdiction is disputed, that makes employing enforcement in maritime security very, very difficult, not least in the South China Sea. And that overarching strategic situation underlies all other aspects of regional security these days. What I would say that is, however, that despite those strategic problems, there are still some common interests in regional maritime security, particularly in the safety and security of shipping and in marine environmental protection, broadly taken, and also dealing with certain other illegal activities. Now, illegal fishing and IUU fishing is a difficult one because that gets down to issues of jurisdiction, and certainly in the South China Sea, that has become a real problem now for countries on the littoral states such as the Philippines and Indonesia, Malaysia, and Vietnam, but I think particularly for the Philippines, in that the Chinese are effectively controlling what are areas of the littoral state exclusive economic zones. And that has been made particularly clear following the adjudication, the award of the arbitral tribunal in the Philippines-China case. That makes dealing with those types of issues very difficult. But nonetheless, some of these other issues are still common interests, and we can, to a certain degree, overcome those underlying political problems, and indeed those are being overcome, for example, by states such as China participating in organizations such as RECAP in the Information Sharing Center in Singapore. So the situation is not all bad, but it is increasingly challenging. And the more that China pushes its interests and its claims, much of which has now been, of course, rejected by the tribunal, the more difficult it will become to cooperate with them in some of these other, say lesser, but less controversial areas. And that is a challenge for all countries. With respect to maritime security issues within the national jurisdiction of a country like Indonesia, obviously Indonesia safeguards its sovereignty very jealously, like all other countries. And so the role in terms of international cooperation for smuggling and armed robbery against ships and other illegal activities within Indonesian waters comes down to issues such as capacity building, combined training and exercises, and help with expertise. And we see a number of countries very active in providing assistance where it's requested, not just for Indonesia, but in throughout Southeast Asia, and indeed increasingly for the countries of South Asia, and also Australia in particular has had a long-standing assistance program for the island states of the South Pacific. So there are many ways in which countries can cooperate to try to ameliorate these threats to maritime security and to improve maritime security cooperation. So I hope that answers the question.
Well, Dr. Chris Rahmat, I hope the answer satisfies your inquiry, Dr. Taher from Lemhanas. We still have another questions. The third questions come from Lieutenant Commander Dwi Jayanto, Puskodal. The questions for Professor Kumar. Is there any specific strategy that the Singapore government used to war with APT advanced persistent threat? We know that defense on cyber is required, but countermeasures are the most important. So, what the best practice that your government does to war with this kind of threat? That's the question, Dr. Jayakumar.
Thank you for the question. It's a great question, because APT, Advanced Persistent Threat Actors, are not simply ordinary fishing criminals. They are not simply other kinds of syndicates. They are well-rehearsed, well-resourced, and capable of putting a great deal of thought into how exactly they're going to exfiltrate the information that they want, which is the case in the Sing Health hack from 2017-2018, which I mentioned just now. The issue here is that Singapore can take a certain degree of technical cyber countermeasures, and for obvious reasons, these are not going to be publicly talked about by the authorities. The facet which I want to shed light here is that the Cybersecurity Agency in Singapore, which was set up in 2015, has done a great deal of not just technical protection work, but trying to shore up the mentalities or the resilience of the people when it comes to cyber vulnerability. And here the issue is that the CSA surveys repeatedly show that ordinary Singaporeans on the street, when they're asked to report on how well they think they can spot a phishing attack, usually report quite high returns, so they're reasonably confident. However, when this is put to the test, the results are less positive and less encouraging. And I know this causes concern to a number of people in the relevant agencies. So are we therefore in a situation where Singapore, which as you know is relatively safe, relatively secure, precisely because everything seems to be so safe, secure, and normal, we tend to take things for granted. So the chief executive of the Cybersecurity Agency of Singapore, he's a man called David Koh, uses this analogy where if you leave your house in the middle of the day, you're not going to leave it unlocked, right? But if you take that thinking, we are repeatedly engaging in these kinds of unsafe or unthinking behaviors when it comes to cyber, like not using two-factor authentication or not routinely using or changing difficult passwords to make them more difficult, or reuse of passwords. So there's something in the psyche of the people which I think needs to be looked at. So that's at the people level. However, there's something important that I do want to mention. I've been told by my Indonesian friends that your word for defense, and please correct me if I'm wrong, which is pertahanan. Am I correct in that? Pertahanan. And that's a wonderful word. My limited understanding of Indonesian and Malay gives me a certain meaning to this word, pertahanan, not just defense, but the ability to withstand. There's a certain connotation of resilience within that word. And I think that's very important. And I think that's something that we in Singapore can look at, meaning not just technical defense, not just cyber defense, but the ability to carry on as if normal, even when your environment is degraded, even when your environment that you ordinarily move around is compromised. Because if you look at what our political leaders and also our cyber officials have been saying over the past few years, Singapore, which is normally safe and secure, needs to prepare for this kind of future where in terms of informationally, and in terms of cyber attacks, we are 24/7 under some sort of sustained pressure by APTs, by others, or by adversaries who seek to undermine Singapore society. So the true test of Singapore cyber resilience and information resilience is not simply technical defense. It is also the ability to carry on, notwithstanding this kind of pressure. And I think this kind of resilience is something that needs to be worked at quite seriously.
Okay, Dr. Sashi Jayakumar. I expect the questioner fully accepts by Lieutenant Commander Dwi Jayanto. Okay, now we still have one question from Captain Rod Griffiths, Defense Attaché from Indonesia, it's U.S. Defense Attaché in Indonesia, for Dr. Chris Rahman. Great power competition within the regions tends to spill over into the HADR space, in that there can be competitions in the area of supporting the affected nations. Do you see any formula to better focus these good intentions by not only the great powers, but for other middle powers as well? That's the questions, Dr. Chris Rahman, from Captain Rod Griffiths.
Thank you, and thank you, Captain Rod, and welcome back to Indonesia, Rod. Good to hear from you. Definitely that there is that undercurrent of a great power competition that sort of underlies all activities in our region that affect different aspects of security. One of the interesting things was actually the response to the Indian Ocean tsunami in 2004 by not just countries like the United States and Australia, but in particular by the likes of Japan, India, and even Singapore, was that the Chinese were left at that stage looking very weak and ineffective because they just had no amphibious capability of the types that these other countries could bring to bear. And so that, in my view, was one reason why the Chinese embarked upon a program to build far more capable amphibious ships. Not the only reason, of course, but it was one reason, because it was certainly, to agree, a loss of face for them. And we see other countries in the region, including Indonesia, building the Makassar class and building also those ships for the Philippines and other countries, Singapore and Malaysia and Thailand and others, getting into the business of improving their capabilities. And I think it's incumbent upon all of those countries to be able to work together better for these types of HADR contingencies. And there are multiple realms or institutions or arrangements within which countries can improve their ability to cooperate in response to an actual disaster, such as through Changi, such as through the WPNS, through ASEAN-centric institutions, such as the ADMM Plus, and on a bilateral basis with other countries. And I think that has been happening. The question is, and going back to one of the earlier questions, is it sufficient? And I think it's perhaps the wrong question to ask. A better way to approach this is, how can we continually improve the effectiveness of our ability to cooperate in response to these disasters? So it's a continual process of improvement, better understanding, better interoperability, better communications, better ability to interoperate. Can we fly our helicopters from each other's ships, for example? That requires training and doctrine and exercising on a consistent basis. One of the issues that I think underpins some of the limitations we experience, not just with this issue, but with many of our regional cooperation measures, such as some of the coordinated patrols, for example, is that they tend to be ad hoc, one-off activities rather than an ongoing program of activities. And this is perhaps the next step, is to look at how we can integrate an ongoing program of exercises and training and exchanges on particularly on a multilateral basis, to allow us to be more effective. And the only real issue with doing that is one of capacity. We all have limited capacity. Doing this stuff costs money. Our annual calendars for doing these things tends to be fairly packed. And of course, we are all impacted by the requirements for greater levels of cooperation at the strategic level. So a country like Australia, for example, is doing a lot more with the United States and with Japan because of the deteriorating strategic situation. And so that also can hinder our ability to program these types of activities. But it's something that we do need to pay attention to and try to overcome this problem of ad hocery, making things a regular activity rather than simply every so often when we feel like it, or when it comes up in a occasional schedule. And that practice, I guess, makes perfect. And our ability to take the lessons from our combined experiences and response to many disasters around the region, whether that's in Indonesia or Thailand or in Sri Lanka or New Zealand or Australia or Japan or wherever. I think there are many experiences that can be brought to bear to improve our collective capacity to undertake these types of operations. So I hope that answers your question, Rod.
Well, thank you, Dr. Pris Rahman, for a great answer. To new Australian Naval Defense Attaché to Indonesia. Okay, it looks like we have covered all of the questions. And thank you to all speakers for answering those questions. And thanks to the audience that had participated actively in this special moment. Thank you very much to all of us. Distinguished seminar participants, ladies and gentlemen, we have been engaged in 3 invaluable presentations, and I believe everyone has enjoyed and taken much benefits from them. Now we will continue the session with expert talks on the theme future challenges and opportunities from maritime security. Among us, we have 2 experts, Admiral retired Professor Dr. Marsetio and Dr. Indroyono Susilo. For the first one, I'm honored to cordially invite Dr. Indroyono Susilo to convey his response, comments, and views. Sir, time is yours.
Thank you, moderators. I hope my voice can be heard.
Yeah, it's clear. Sir.
Okay, clear. Thank you very much. First of all, thank you very much to SESKOAL for inviting me in these maritime seminars. It is very interesting. I followed from the beginning in the morning regarding the presentation of the 3 panelists, and also I follow the discussion, which is interesting. And I'd like to share with you how to respond of this very good presentation and discussion, and try to find something in commonalities. At the same time, also we should proceed. What can we do together in the future? Let's start. What is at stake? What we are talking about? We talk about transnational organized crime, illegal fishing, disaster-prone areas. We talk about regional piracy. Some talk about the border problems. There are also on cyber cooperations. There is activities on AHA Center. This is the ASEAN Disaster Relief Center, and a lot of things has been discussed this morning, including how to improve the standard of doctrine to conduct joint naval exercise and operation in this region. So what is at stake? First of all, I'd like to share with you why this thing happened, because this area, this region is very rich in marine biodiversity. We have 920 species of coral reefs, for example, in a 65,000 square kilometers. A big area of this region is very rich in marine resources. Among others are coral reefs. This can be used for everything. It's the place for the birth of all the fishes and so on. Second, if you talk about the global fish diversities in the world, you see that those dark brown colors, those are the richest, the most diverse region in terms of fish diversities. This also will increase the issues of regarding the illegal fishing, regarding the trans-organizational crime, and so on. Because of this area is very rich in this. Number three, you know, is in the plate tectonic theory, this is the collision of three plate tectonics: the Eurasia, which is moving to the southeast, the Indo-Australia moving northward, and the Pacific moving westward. The rate of the plate movement is around 5 centimeters per year. So making this region prone to earthquakes, tsunamis, volcanic eruptions, you know, among other disasters. However, this area very rich in mineral, oil, and gas resources. So there is some problem in regarding disaster, but also because of these three plate tectonic collisions, we have this area very rich in resources, mineral, and also oil and gas. Number three, you see that yes, this area is very important because of the global strategic sea lanes. You know, the Malacca Strait, Indian Ocean, those are the very, very heavily congested area in terms of sea traffic, maritime traffic. So a lot of activities, a lot of trans-organized crime also presence in this area of this region. Last thing, maybe it's not your interest, but you should know on this. This is the place where we have what we call the Arlindo, the Indonesian see-through flow. In the early of this century, this theory has been known and presented all over the world, showing that yes, the ocean current moved from the Pacific Ocean into the Indian Ocean. They are passing the Indonesian archipelago. In some moment, some of this current is moving eastward. This is where we have the climate variability or climate change, like the El Nino, the La Nina, and so on. So this area bring impact on forest fire, for example, on field harvest, among others. And this is because of this issue of this. So this is all at stake. How can we, from the maritime security sector, can overcome and tackle these matters? So first, I would like to propose to you, and I think this is what we discussed in the morning. First, let's follow the international law and regulations. By having the international law and regulation as our baseline, we can move forward and we can work together, we can cooperate together in the same playing field. Number one, of course, if in all of the country here, except Myanmar, I think we are all compliant to the UNCLOS 1982. So let's follow the regulation in the UNCLOS. Number two, I think it was presented this morning in the first speakers on the United Nations Convention Against Transnational Organized Crime. And Indonesia already ratified this convention. Okay, let's follow also. This is regulation. Number three, we are in ASEAN Charter, which is in one of those, and we have to follow this also. One is to maintain, enhance peace, security, and stability, and further strengthen peace-oriented values in this region. So we have to preserve the peace and security in this region, including within our ocean and our ocean border and so on. Having said that, one issue we have to tackle is we have to follow this regulation. So try to overcome the issues which might hinder this to follow this regulation. For example, I'd like to show one example. Indonesia and Malaysia still have to discuss their sea borders in the Malacca Straits under UNCLOS 1982. You know, it was mentioned earlier by the first speaker. They mentioned that yes, there's some problem in the Malacca Strait on a transnational crime. But the problem you see is this the Indonesian sea border or with this the Malaysian sea border. Since here in this SESKOAL classes, there's also what do you call it, the officer from Malaysia, also from Indonesia. Why you start also make some discussions so that we can have this solved? Because there's still a problem for our fishermen, the problem caught by the Malaysian authority, and so on. And let's follow the UNCLOS. Indonesia is the archipelagic nations. Malaysia is a continental nation. So this is one of the examples. Having a same they call a platform, this making easier for us to conduct all other maritime security measures. Last but not least, you know that everybody, all the countries, almost 200 countries in the world declare the United Nations SDGs 2020. What are 17 goals need to be achieved by all countries all over the world? Indonesia ratified this in 2016. We signed this in September 2015. Out of those 17 goals, they are goal number 14. Conserve and sustainably use the ocean, seas, and marine resources for sustainable development. What does it mean? Our maritime security sector also has to deal with this. Anything to conserve, anything utilize our ocean and resources, this is to be part in line with the maritime security sectors in this region. I'd like to share to you, because it was mentioned regarding cybersecurity and so on. So in doing so, I like to propose, let's implement science and technology, because with the science and technology, actually the ocean is only a pool of water with the blue colors. That's it. But with science and technology, we get everything. We have to protect everything, because prosperity and security is a one coin and two sides. So I like to show to you how advanced the technology on the satellite technologies in terms of resolution and in terms of repetition. You know, before, 3 decades ago, the satellite mostly is, the resolution is not too high, only 70 meters resolution. And the repetition is maybe 18 days per 18 days, they cover in the same area, in the same place. Now, there's 173 satellite available all over above our space. That means we are able to make a repetitions so many times a day. A country like Indonesia, a country in this tropical area, sometimes covered by clouds. However, with this kind of repetition, highly repetition satellite technology, you get more and more data in the same area. The second, we have 30 SkySat satellite, which is the resolution is only half meter. So a point with the size of 50 centimeter by 50 centimeters on the ground now can be spotted on a commercial satellite. This is improvement in technology. So the accumulation of this can be used for the inventory, monitoring, and also analysis and prediction. So with the question coming from one of the SESKOAL members mentioned that what happened with the security, this is all is open. You don't need any security. You just use your credit card, you get the data right away. I like to show you some example. So with the sat imaging, like in Singapore, you can pinpoint the number of ships and the number of cars, in this highway in Singapore. This is, I like to show to you the 31st of July 2018 of the naval base in Surabaya. If you want to have the current, suppose you just call now to sat image, a SkySat, you can get the data of this naval base today. But I just want to show to you what I shown to you at 31st of July, so 2 years ago. It's very easy, you can see the Bima Suci, tall ships, and you can see the 2 types of hospital ships, KRI Dr. Suharto is there, and there are 2 fan-speak frigates. It's easy, you can count, Because why? The resolution is so high, and also the cloud cover can be hindered because of the so many repetition in the area. In the pool, you see so many we call it battleships, including corvette and so on. So this is available. You can get it within 24 hours right now. You can send by email and so on. You can get, this is maybe Sydney Harbor with the Opera House. This is also all available. So what I mean is use the technologies now and readily available technologies to do all this monitoring, assessment, inventory, and so on. It was mentioned earlier, yes, why this area is so important? We make a measurement that the ocean current, the waters from the ocean move from the Pacific into the Indian Ocean. How big it is? 1.5 million cubic meters per second. The interesting thing is those ocean currents move toward our straits, some of those to Makassar Strait, 9 million of those, and then go straight to the Lombok Strait, 1.7 million of those. Some of those move into the Banda Sea and then back into the Indian Ocean. That's the area. But some of those also, the ocean current, move back into the Pacific Ocean, to Halmar and so on. If this happen, this will make the conditionality of El Nino and La Nina. See? If there's normal, December to February, you have a rainy season in the Indonesian region on the west, on the left side. Today, it's mentioned by our president, and based on our assessment, this year is a La Nina year. Why? Because most of the water vapor it moved from the Pacific toward our archipelagos. Be careful with the floods. Be careful with the failed harvest and so on. But if there's El Nino, move the warm pool, the moisture move into the central of the Pacific, and this will get what we call a long drought. You get the problem of forest fire and so on. How to do this? So we put all of this monitoring buoy all over our region. If Indonesia is not able to do it alone, we do it together. And with the US, with the NOAA, for example, with China, and we are fortunate by 2008 we are able to put so many buoys, floating buoys, all over Indonesian archipelagos. So I like to propose to you that besides doing joint patrol and coordinate patrol by our region, please also monitor our buoys, because on land we make a border patrol by checking the longitude position, right, on land. But here maybe we can add one additional program during our patrol and so on by checking all these floating buoy, because it's very important. Because to predict El Nino, to predict La Nina, to predict the incoming tsunami and so on. So we had the problem. When we have in 2008, it was a volcanic eruption of Krakatoa. Remember, during the New Year, Christmas Eve, our tsunamis were gone because it was stolen or something like that. So there is some vandalism in this our floating buoys in the area. So we have to put it again, for example, here in Sunda Strait. So I'd like to propose, maybe since we do all these activities, why do you also use your patrolling also to patrol our buoys? It's very important to predict climate variability, to predict climate change, because they bring impact to the welfare of the people in the region. So to conclude, what we have discussed this morning, I like to propose, yes, I think you have done this, but we have to improve these activities. We have to do some information sharing and also information gathering. What I like to mention to you is not only navies to navies, but also with other stakeholders. At the same time, also as mentioned by our colleague, the third speakers, now with the internet technologies, you can get all of the information readily available, including the satellite data online in the latest, the real time, and so on. Number two, you have to conduct more joint exercises for disaster relief, among others. Okay, because and what I like to propose to you, please, when you do some exercises, please the file put it in good documentations. What thing happened during if disaster happened, you just retrieve from the file. You just use the exercise that we conducted to become your operational activities to eradicate the disaster or to do the disaster tax relief operation. Number three, conducting coordinated patrol. I think we have done this, but please also put all the documentation, all the file in the good file. I don't want to say to you, but I just want to mention a little bit that many Indonesians as not too familiar of documenting all the documents. So many of us sometimes not archiving our documents in a good method. So sometimes we lost our documents. Please, with these joint exercises, the patrol, the enrollment sharing, please put it in good documents. So we have done this. Thank you very much for all your activities. Indonesia, Singapore, joint exercises. We have Indonesia, Malaysia, joint exercises. Indonesia, Thailand, joint exercises. Indonesia, Australia, joint exercises. Please do improve and increase the number of the exercises. It's good because I know that all the personnel will be moving upward. The new one will coming. So I think, well, this one, you have to do more on this. Based on the agreed upon compliable regulation that we agree in the regions and in the world. Indonesia have the Komodo exercise every 2 years. It's a 46 country. I think it's a good exercises for disaster response. Please do continue this collaboration, but please also make a good documentation of this exercise, because this is really a value document when we have a really disaster relief operation. Also 10 countries cooperation afloat for readiness and training, CARAT, is also up I think this one is every year. And I think this is a very good and involving also big countries like United States, and also involving the new countries like Timor-Leste. You should do this more because and do it in much larger participants. I'd like to share with you some of the Indonesian Minister of Marine Affairs and Fisheries and the Australian Marine Border Force, AMBF, and the Australian Fisheries Management Authority conducting a joint border patrol for combating illegal fishing. This is a good activities. Let's continue. Maybe let's do it mostly in the EEZ area, because I think many of the maritime security issues mostly is in the EEZ area. I think this is a good thing to do. And I think the last but not least, I think Indonesia, Malaysia, and the Philippines have some collaboration. I hope still in collaboration in joint patrols, sharing information and intelligence data and quick response on disaster call. It's a good activities. Let's continue to do this. More exercises, more joint patrol, more training in the regional level. I think this will improve our capabilities in maritime securities in the region. Thank you very much. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. And many thanks for the great response, comments, and review that you have delivered, Dr. Indroyono Susilo. Distinguished audience, ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome to our second expert, Admiral Retired Professor Dr. Marsetio, who will be sharing with us his expert opinions related to future challenges and opportunities for maritime security. And for your information, Professor Dr. Marsetio has just landed in Batam, but he still joined us for this great event from VIP room of Batam Airport to give his expert opinion. Well, Admiral, the floor is yours.
Selamat siang, yang saya hormati Komandan SESKOAL, Admiral Iwan, dan para speakers. Ada Profesor Dr. Indroyono, Menko Maritime 2014-2016, juga para pembicara terdahulu, Dr. Rahman, kemudian Dr. Jayakumar, para panitia, dan yang mewakili Kasal ada Waas Intel, Admiral Denny, dan staf dari SESKOAL, dan juga moderator, Bapak Ibu sekalian. First of all, thank you very much indeed. It's a great honor for me to be here and to join with all of you. I'm so sorry a little bit late because I just landed in Batam, and I would like it's a good honor to join with all of the participants during the international seminar in SESKOAL. Also, thank you very much for the moderator. First of all, allow me to congratulate to SESKOAL for organizing today's international seminar. I know that both speaker and participant participate online and offline. Indeed, it's a great honor to be here and to contribute to a very important topic, future challenges and opportunity for maritime security. With the distinguished speaker have presented their comprehensive talk on the subject. Because very critical time for me, so that's why I make the comment from all the people from the guest speaker since yesterday. On this occasion, I would like to highlight some comment from the first speaker, from Admiral Angkasa, was explain the reality of the region transnational organized crime, or TOC, especially the one acted at and out through the sea for the region, for Indonesia. This threat is very real. For example, in 2019, it is report on Southeast Asia TOC and UNODC that estimated the value of retail market in Southeast Asia as much as $25.7 billion annually. This lucrative business has made the region to go market for not only meth, but also other legal substance. From presentation from Professor Dr. Indoyono, he stated that the cooperation among the country, not only the ASEAN, but as for all the country all over the world. I think we would like, if we back to highlight the presentation from Admiral Angkasa, again, that managing maritime security challenges and threat require cooperation on national, regional, and international level. And Admiral Angkasa has explained very clearly the role of Indonesian Navy in managing TOC, threat, and existing cooperation and initiative. Again, that the role of regional navies in managing maritime security issue was once again underlined by Dr. Rahman, as he gave us a comprehensive look on the role of navies in responding to disaster relief, both natural and man-made. The importance of navies in humanitarian disaster relief is not a question. I believe we all understand the significance of navies from the organization, capabilities, and platform, and especially from the benefit country and the region obtain the regional naval cooperation on this issue. If we back and the question, how serious are Navy with disaster response? I think it's very serious. I can at least provide an example from the Indonesian Navy. During my time as the Chief of Indonesian Navy, we organized the first ever multilateral naval exercise, Komodo, in 2014 that focused on humanitarian disaster relief related activities and exercise. What is interesting, not only is the first multilateral naval exercise Indonesia has ever hosted, but also it covers not only the navies for Southeast Asia, but also major countries in the Indian Pacific region, as well as at the time, United Kingdom, Royal Navy, from French Navy, also as well as from the German Navy, also participate on the Komodo exercise in 2014. Ladies and gentlemen, I think it was even before the first Asian Maritime Naval Exercise, or AMNEC, in 2017, the Komodo exercise continued to be an important agenda for Indonesian Navy as well as regional navies. I think during the presentation from Professor Dr. Indoyono, also he makes some photo from the activity on the Komodo exercise from the 2014 till 2015. Ladies and gentlemen, but I do agree with Dr. Rahman that navies still have many homework in regard to naval cooperation on humanitarian disaster relief. I would like to highlight interoperability and compatibility, since it's not a secret that Navy in the region are not on the same path in terms of capacity, capability, platform, and posture. Gentlemen, in regard to the implication of the pandemic for navies, Dr. Rahman has stated a very important point, and I'm glad to say that navies, including the Indonesian Navy, has started them. A good example in the latest webinar organized by IKAHAN, the Royal Australian Navy, shared its experience in managing the pandemic during the multilateral operation at sea for a period of time with not only the Indonesian Navy, but also with IDU, student, and academic. As a former commanding officer of not only warship, but also a naval base and the commander of the vessel fleet, ensuring the safety and health of our sailors is paramount. Without healthy sailors, there's not much we could do. I share Dr. Rahman's comment that we should have pandemic protocol in place, both navies on operation as well as while conduct exercise and operation with fellow regular navies. From these two speakers, we could identify the importance of two elements in regard to navies and maritime security issues: information sharing and cooperation. Yes, we have done both through existing mechanism, facility, agreement, and framework for them. Still, as the first two speakers have explained, we have a lot of things to do and catch up. Ladies and gentlemen, I think the cooperation that we already done with all the country, not only the ASEAN level, but as well as all the country all over the world, I think we see reminded since 2014, also in the Navy, for the first time, we are attending the biggest exercise handled by US Navy, named the RIMPAC exercise. And we know together from all the media that in 2016, again, the RIMPAC exercise attended by 200 warships, including the aircraft carrier and the submarine. Ladies and gentlemen, speaking of information sharing, Dr. Jai Kumar spoke about information warfare, explaining from how to frame this information and fake news to how countries in the world are preparing for cyber and information warfare. What is clear that the rush of information into our personal space, thanks to the rapid development of information technology, has brought about a harsh reality that we are unprepared. I said Dr. Jayakumar's comment on the importance of critical thinking in our society in order to spot what is fake and what is a fact. Fact checking is very important, and the device we always bring with us, our mobile phone, provide the means to do such a thing. I believe it's important for country to share their experience and best practices in facing information warfare, disinformation and fake news, as this is a still relatively new issue for us. However, I would like to add that the implication of cyber attack and the fake news would have devastating impact in the maritime domain. And cyber attack could actually occur in international ports with significant economic and logistic implication as port systems are becoming more reliant and digital and networked. Ladies and gentlemen, before ending my comment, I would like to briefly underline that our regional maritime domain is also challenged by rivalry of the United States and China. If we look the geomaritime in South China Sea, especially in the US Indo-Pacific era, we know that an open conflict between the new two countries will be the least desirable event to occur in our waters, not only by a regional country, but also by the two rivals. Nevertheless, the possibility of a clash among maritime security agencies, navies and coast guard is becoming larger as time progresses. Ladies and gentlemen, especially to the commander of Naval Staff and Command College, Admiral Dr. Iwan. Hence, returning to the theme of today's seminar, the importance of cooperation, I believe it's about time that we become more realistic in regard to the realities, find concrete ways on how, especially Southeast Asian countries, will face this rivalry in the future. China's rise and possibility of dominance is evident, while America's influence remains important in a region where balance of power is crucial to peace and prosperity. The maritime domain is one of the theaters of struggle of influence, strengthening existing maritime cooperation and deepening our communication and information sharing. Maybe some of this way we could face such challenges. I thank you, and thank you again for the committee, for the Admiral Dr. Iwan, Commander Staff and Command College. It's a great honor indeed for me to attending this international seminar. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we finally come to the end part of this seminar session 1. And before I close the seminar, I would like to take the conclusion from what have been presented. Rear Admiral Dipua has brought up several important aspects in TOC, starting from each variant definition that might also affect different approaches of each country. Presentation, Dr. Rahman reminded us about the vulnerability from various natural and man-made disasters that had and might have possibly happened everywhere in the world. For the last speaker, Dr. Sashi Jayakumar elaborated strategies to counter disinformation issues and manage the bad impacts. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we don't realize that time flies very quickly, and it is time for us to end this session. I'm confident that this seminar will be very beneficial for you in the coming future, and please accept my apology if there is any inconvenience along the sessions. And before we finish, please give applause to the speakers, experts, and for all of us in here. Thank you very much, and I give the moment back to the MC. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Captain Sylvia. Distinguished guests and all participants, we have come to the end of the first session of the presentation and discussion. Next event is lunch break.
Terima kasih, moderator. Selanjutnya kami mohon kepada moderator berkenan untuk kembali ke tempat. Hadirin peserta seminar yang kami hormati, selanjutnya kita akan melaksanakan isoma terlebih dahulu sebelum paparan sesi kedua dimulai, dan dimohon kepada peserta seminar pada pukul 12.50 diharapkan sudah menempati tempat yang telah disediakan. Dan selanjutnya untuk santap siang disiapkan di pendopo SESKOAL kepada yang terhormat Komandan SESKOAL, diikuti oleh narasumber, pejabat utama, dan perwira siswa dari negara sahabat berkenan untuk menuju pendopo SESKOAL melaksanakan santap siang. Dan untuk perwira siswa yang lain bisa kembali ke mes masing-masing. Terima kasih.